Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Very nice to have you all here. Welcome to a regular meeting of the City of Morro Bay Planning Commission, February 2024, Veterans Memorial Building. I would like to introduce the planning commissioners to you all. Let me start with Vice Chair Mike Rodriguez.
Good evening.
Commissioner Joseph Ingrafia. Commissioner Asia King, and Commissioner Eric Meyer. My name is Bill Roshan, and I'm your chair this evening. And welcome. We're very happy to have you all here. And I've established a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. If we could have a moment of silence, please, to begin the meeting. Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Planning Commissioner announcements, commissioners. I do have one announcement. I'd like to welcome our interim director, Michael Codron. Thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate you doing this for us. And you want to say a couple of words of hello to everybody?
Sure thing, Chairman Roshan. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and help out the City of Morro Bay. For a period of time, I'll be interim, be helping the city manager do the recruitment for a director, and do everything I can to address the needs of the community, keep community development moving forward, and supporting the work of the city. So while I'm here, I'm looking forward to working hard and participating. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We've only heard nice things, so thank you. Second announcement, I would like to welcome, we have some folks here from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Would you guys mind standing and waving? Thanks for being here. A couple of weeks ago, I was able to attend a seminar that they conducted in a team study for Morro Rock, and it was looking at the area surrounding it. And they're here to witness the master plan tonight and to get a sense for how the Planning Commission works. But at our next meeting on, what is that, the 5th of March? The team has agreed to present their 3 schemes for all of us here at the beginning of the next Planning Commission meeting. So I'm looking forward to that. Other announcements? Hearing none, we can move right to public comment. Public comment, this is a time where you can speak on anything that's not on the agenda. If you can't stay for the entire meeting, we will welcome comments on the agenda item as well. Terry, welcome. Nice to have you.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm here speaking about an item that I've watched slowly surface in other agencies. This is a legislative agenda that's being brought forward by something called the Central Coast Coalition. But if you look them up, you can't find them. But you can find some of their subordinate entities, one of which is REACH. We have had experience with REACH here and their work on both the power plant BESS and the offshore wind. This legislative agenda that I have, and I forwarded you all copies of them. I don't know if you've gotten them yet. Sorry, I tried to bring a hard copy and then forgot it. Particular item 5 appears to be a thinly guised attack on the Brown Act, wherein under this proposed amendment to the Brown Act, all public meetings that would normally require your attendance will be able to be done virtually. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal, except I could envision a meeting where each one of your seats is replaced by a monitor as you all come in from wherever you happen to be, and the public is theoretically precluded from comment because it probably doesn't happen in a real room. It happens in a closet somewhere or in the virtual environment. I know that sounds, I used to say a lot like 1984, but that's so far behind us, I don't know that that's a good reference anymore. Maybe it's something like 2050 or 2035 that's ahead of us. I hope that your commission and the council and other bodies like yours will take a hard look at this and particularly go in depth with the assemblyman that's bringing this forward to find out what his real intentions are. Thank you.
Terry, thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak at public comment before we get into our items? Could we put Cindy, the clock? Yeah.
Question first, is this the appropriate time to speak about the presentation tonight, or should we wait till after that?
If you could wait, that would be better.
That's even better, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
I want to
much.
know what I'm talking about.
Nice to have you here. Anyone else in the audience who'd like to talk? Hey, Jeff.
I just have a quick question, not related to this agenda item tonight, but the City of Morro Bay in May of 2021 approved the general plan and the LCP, which involves this area, of course. And the land use designation is visitors serving commercial with a mixed-use residential overlay. Now, as I understand it, that has not been certified by the Coastal Commission yet, and I'm just wondering when that is supposed to happen, or when do we think it would happen? And that's my question and comment.
Got it. Thank you, Jeff. Cindy, do we have an easy response to that?
We do. And I don't know if the microphone's on here, but
It is.
okay. We just found out from the Coastal Commission last week that we will be on their March agenda. And so that's anticipated to be sometime between March 13th and 15th. And they will take up our application to certify the zoning code implementation plan. So that's good news for the city. We'll have a fully certified and legally effective zoning code.
Good news. Thank you. Anyone else? Chris, Anthony, our audio consultants. Anybody on the in the queue?
Chair, there are no raised hands in queue.
With that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, and we will go to the next item, which is the consent calendar. Commissioners, any comments on these items? Do I have a motion
So moved.
to
Second.
To approve.
approve all?
Mr.
Mike,
Chair,
second.
permission to speak on that item? You didn't ask for public comment on it?
Which item?
Consent agenda?
Okay.
In reviewing the advanced planning process list, I've been quite concerned about the ever-growing number of applications that have been returned to the
Your
applicant.
mic's off.
Oh, mic's not on? Well, that's not my job. Oh, there you
Okay,
go. Is that
just
better?
talk right into it.
Okay.
Terry?
I've been increasingly concerned by the ever-growing number of applications that seem to be returned to the applicant incomplete. Either our applicants are not very good, which is possible, or there is a deficit in the amount of guidance that our planning department is giving the applicants when they first come in to make sure that they have an adequate understanding of what constitutes a complete application. This is not obviously something you can really go into detail on tonight, but I would hope that there could be a future agenda item. I know it's part of an ongoing streamlining the process issue that's been going on with the planning department for years. But like I say, rather than seeing fewer and fewer incomplete applications, I'm seeing more and more, and it's concerning. Thank you.
So noted, Terry. Thank you. I do have a motion on the floor.
Second.
First and seconded. Any further discussion, commissioners? Hearing none, would you poll the commission?
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia,
Yes.
Chairperson Roshan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
New business, C1. This is not a public hearing. This is a study session agenda item only. This is the power plant master plan. And I did want to introduce tonight, we have the assistant city attorney with us, Lana.
Lana Lehman.
Pleased to be here.
Thank you for being here. And we also have a Rincon representative, Ryan.
Hello, thank you.
Great, thank you. Cindy, would you want to, let's see, it is case number MAJ 23-001. Site location is 1290 Embarcadero. Would you like to take it away, Cindy?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Roshan. It's great to be here to be able to discuss this draft master plan for the power plant property. As you noted, this is a study session discussion item tonight for public comment and review by the Planning Commission. This is not a public hearing. And just to clarify for the record, we are not here to discuss the proposed pending application for the battery energy storage system project, nor are we discussing the environmental impact report tonight. Item is just being brought forward for discussion and input by the Planning Commission to receive additional community input that we would use to proceed with the development of the draft master plan.
And so could you explain in a little more detail for the public the BESS application, separate process,
Yes, so
and that's dependent on?
Time's up. That was my time. I'll reserve that time for later.
sorry, I'm a little bit new to handling the timer here. That was Scott's job before. He's not here now. I have to figure out how to use this timer. But yes, I can provide some clarification for that. So it is on the record that Vistra has submitted an application. They submitted that in December 2020, and that is a pending application. That's not the subject of tonight's review. But as part of that application, it did trigger a requirement in the city's general plan, local coastal plan, which is policy LU 5.4, and it's discussed in the staff report. And that requires a master plan be prepared for redevelopment of the site upon application. And so the pending application did trigger this requirement for the master plan. That policy states that the master plan would be the responsibility of the developer upon property development. And so the reason the city is working on a master plan for the site is because of this policy requirement. Rincon has been hired by the city to develop this plan, and as noted in the land use policy requirement, that is the responsibility of the developer, and so they are paying for that through a reimbursement agreement, but it is the city's consultant that is preparing and developing the master plan.
Could you clue us into the EIR schedule as well? The EIR schedule as well, relative to that application?
Right. So it is the city's expectation that the EIR would likely be released in the next 2 to 4 weeks. We are dealing with, just finalizing, the last minute touches on that, but that is the expectation when we expect that the EIR would be released.
Great. And so we'll get more definition on how this has been constructed, but the Rincon has broken the master plan into 5 areas that we can discuss. One of the areas, 12 acres, I think, is the best storage, and the application is not part of the discussion tonight, but the area is described in the master plan.
That is correct. So yeah, the area of the property is about 24 acres. That is the overall property is 107 acres in size. So the master plan is for the entire 107 acres. We know that we do have this open application, and we know that there's been a lot of public input so far on that application. What we're really hoping to get out of tonight is what would happen with the balance of the site. And I'll let Rincon go over this in their presentation, but we have had some community outreach so far in the master plan process, and we're really hoping that we can get input from the Planning Commission and from the public on what is the vision and the goals in the future for the balance of that site.
Great. Thank you so much.
Can I ask a clarifying
Sure,
question?
go ahead, Michael.
Since we're there. You said the master plan will be the responsibility of the developer. In your report, it says the master plan will be the responsibility of the property owner and development. Now, are they the same?
So the policy language in the general plan says developer or property owner, just recognizes that,
But in this case, is it the same?
And in this case, it's the same because they are proposing a development application vis-a-vis the pending planning permit application.
Thanks, Mike. Assistant City Attorney, I'd like you, if you would, just to map out for the commissioners the edges of how we should conduct this hearing, especially relative to the battery storage.
Thank you. Some of this will
Talk,
help.
if you can, right into the mic. Yeah.
And I apologize that I also have a hoarse throat.
Oh, feel better.
Hopefully, some of this will answer some of Commissioner Rodriguez's questions. As was mentioned, the specifics of the BESS application are not the subject of the study session tonight. While the BESS application may have triggered the need for a master plan update, the master plan itself, as a draft, makes no commitment to that triggering application. Indeed, an application for any other property in that, in the subject 107 acres, would have triggered the exact same need for a new master plan. With respect to the specific BESS application, given that the BESS application is still pending environmental analysis, other application analysis, the appropriate time to discuss BESS project details would be at the future public hearing, and that is because that will be the time at which you are provided with the full evidentiary record. Further on the BESS application or project, there's nothing about the discussion tonight that waives any city discretion on that upcoming matter, and separate matter. I'm not saying there's not some relation, but it is a separate application matter. And the master plan work presented tonight will still, whatever happens with the BESS application, the master plan work provided to you tonight will be of great utility to the city as a general long-term planning document.
Thank you for making the trip up here tonight. Commissioners, any questions
Yeah,
for the assistant?
Another
or
question.
Assistant attorney?
So again, looking at our document, the city's application that and the presentation that was prepared, it says the BESS project will be 24 acres, and the Morro Bay Power Plant master plan will be 107 acres. Now, will the EIR cover 24 acres or 107 acres? When we get it, I'm just preparing. You know, usually we have that document by now, but when we get it, will it cover the whole 107 or 24?
I can answer that, Commissioner Rodriguez. The EIR will cover the environmental impacts as a result of the proposed application, which is for the battery energy storage system project. And it will also address all components of the application. It does include discussion of the master plan as it relates to the fact that the overall project requires a coastal development permit and other planning permits, as well as it includes demolition of the power plant building, the 3 stacks. It triggers the requirement for a master plan, as we've described in the staff report, and then it would also require a general plan, local coastal plan, land use, and zoning map amendment.
Cindy, thank you. Eric?
I have a question with respect to the pipelines associated with the property. Are they associated with the BESS project, the old pipelines I'm talking about, which fuel oil was delivered to the tanks? Are those part of the BESS application, or are those part of tonight's discussion?
So they would not be part of tonight's discussion. Tonight's discussion would really be, and we can get to this with Rincon's presentation, but it would be regarding high-level planning for the master plan and really looking at what have we done so far as community outreach, identifying land use preferences, circulation, and site design amenities. And if I may offer one other point that I wanted to make as part of my presentation was that the master plan is really being developed as 2 phases. And so really what we're doing tonight is, or with this, overall project, is phase 1. And so phase 1 of the master plan really is to establish an overall land use vision There's no proposed development for the rest of the property. We just have a proposed development application for the 24 acres. So when there is future development applications for the remainder of the site, that's what would trigger phase 2 of the master plan. And so the master plan that we're working on right now is more of a high-level planning document.
Eric?
One other question.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I'll ask it later. Never mind.
Cindy, thank you. Joe?
My question is for the city attorney. This document mentions that in 1997 there was a deed restriction placed on the property when the property was sold to Duke, and then it mentions in 206 that the Department of Toxic Substance Control required a land use covenant with PG&E at the time when PG&E no longer owned the property. So can you explain to me? I'll speak louder. So can you explain to me exactly what the responsibilities are being addressed in that document where PG&E no longer owns the property?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, you could not hear me?
Oh, PG&E, who no longer owns the property.
Yeah, the question I have is in 206, they didn't own the property, yet they were required to enter into this land use covenant. Can you explain exactly why they were responsible for entering into that covenant? I'm curious about that.
Well, if it was involving DTSC, then DTSC commonly does impose covenants for, say, environmental remediation. Now, for the master plan, since we're not dealing with a specific project at this point in time, that type of DTSC remediation requirements, deed restriction requirements, and satisfaction of those requirements could be part of the conditions of approval for a project application, as opposed to something that would be directly and specifically addressed in this master plan.
But the covenant agreement, perhaps I'm wrong here, but did the covenant agreement take place in 206? Or was it simply proposed? Maybe that's the problem I'm having.
And actually, I do not know.
Because it seemed from the document that they entered into a covenant agreement in 206. And I was wondering, I guess the question I'm asking is what prompted that covenant? There were responsibilities. I think the state felt that PG&E had certain responsibilities, and I'd like to know what those responsibilities might have been that ended up in the covenant agreement.
In terms of those factual type of questions, I believe Rincon may have some input on that.
Oh, okay, very good.
Well, let's pick that up after the presentation. Only questions that really are going to prepare us for the presentation. Anything else, Joe? Asia? With that, I think if there's no other questions, let's go to Rincon and the presentation. Ryan?
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan. Hi, commissioners. Hi, community. I'm with Rincon Consultants. I used to be a planning intern actually here.
Talk right into the mic if you can.
I used to be a planning intern here back in 2016, so I'm excited to be here again working with the city and going over some of the preliminary feedback and giving some comments from yourself and the community. So let's see if this works.
So Ryan, when you speak, if you could, be as loud and direct right into the mic.
I'll do my best.
That's better. Thank you.
I'm not sure why this isn't advancing. It said it accepted it. Oh, there we go. There we go. It's not advancing on the screen. Apologies.
Anthony's the rescue.
So it's changing on the screen, but not on the display.
Joe and I will go down and help.
Not even letting me. All right. Sorry about that.
We're back on?
We're back on.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
All right, so I just wanted to go over quickly what the agenda is for today. So I'm going to go over an overview of the master plan, why we're creating it, a little bit of background on the property itself, some of the summary from the public outreach that's been done so far. Then I'll touch on some of the site constraints of the property. And based on those constraints and public outreach done so far, I will go over some of the draft master plan vision. And that's really what we want to get your feedback on this evening. Then we'll open it up to discussion, public comment, and go over next steps. What is this? Yeah. Apologies. All right, so just to get an overview of the master plan, just a bit of background of the power plant property. So why are we creating the master plan? Cindy already kind of went over this, but the site has a land use designation of visitors serving commercial, but due to the size, the location of the property near the bay, and some potential constraints on the site, the city included a policy in the general plan to requires a preparation of this master plan whenever a project is submitted. So as Cindy mentioned, there is a project submitted, the battery project, and that really triggered the preparation of this master plan. So the power plant site is 107 acres. So the master plan includes the proposed project as well as the rest of the site. So it's a really great opportunity for the community to see what they want to see on the overall power plant property. Like Cindy mentioned, the master plan is going to be conducted in 2 phases. This first phase is really trying to establish an overall land use vision and action plan for the development of the site in the future. So this first phase includes conducting public outreach, identifying site constraints and opportunities, and establishing a vision and land use strategy. So the second phase, which will occur later on, will use this first phase and identify site-specific planning and programming. Maybe I'll use this. Correct. I think it's when I click a different window, it goes. All right. I think this should work. I think I skipped a slide. Okay, so sorry about that, everyone. I'll just use the script here. So here are some of the draft objectives for the master plan, and these were created to help guide really the preparation of the master plan itself. So I'll go over these objectives now. They're to provide a vision for the physical development of the power plant site that will address site planning related to the former tank farm area, improve circulation in the northern Embarcadero area, improve pedestrian connections, identify land use strategies and opportunities to achieve the vision, and serve as a guide during phase 2 of the master plan process. So because the site is so large, I just wanted to give a bit of background, and most of the site is not accessible to the public, so I think it'll be useful to just go over a bit of background. So the property is 107 acres, and due to the size, there are a number of areas that have unique qualities, whether that's their location, existing uses on the site, topography, or resources. And so the master plan really looks at 5 unique areas on the site to help create a unique vision for each of these different areas, which has, a unique quality to them. So I'll go over each of these 5 areas, and this is really how the master plan separates out the property. So the first area is the Embarcadero frontage. This is the area that really faces the bay, interacts with Embarcadero Road. So this area is really in front of the stacks and includes the trees along the property frontage. So this was selected as an area due to its interaction with the roadway, proximity to the bay, and other commercial uses. The second area shown in red is the location of the generating plant and the stacks. This area is generally flat, pretty much graded. It also includes Pacific Wildlife Care, and it has a back access point at Main Street and Quintana Road. Another thing to note about this area is it's adjacent to the PG&E switchyard, so that'll be important when thinking about compatibility issues because the PG&E switchyard isn't, the nicest thing to look at. The next area is along Scott Street, so that's shown in purple. So this has varying topography. It's actually located just right outside here, as you are aware. The area is mostly undeveloped with a few accessory structures, and it has the potential to interact with the adjacent neighborhood there. The next area identified is the former tank farm site. So this is the area where the proposed project is located and has remnants of the former tanks that were located there. And then finally in green is Lila Kaiser Park and Morrow Creek. So this is a unique area. It's low-lying, has a lot of natural vegetation, and it's one of the only areas on the site that is currently open to the public. So that's really how the master plan is looking at the overall property and trying to plan for future vision of development on the site. And next, I wanted to go over some of the summary from the public outreach. As part of the master plan process, community outreach was and continues to be conducted. I think you probably see the flyers for the second community workshop. So ahead of this meeting, we had a first community workshop, which had over 80 participants, which was great. We also released a public survey, which had over 609 responses, which is a great amount of participation. And then we also interviewed interested parties, and these included the Embarcadero leaseholders, commercial fishermen, Morro Bay Chamber of Commerce, Maritime Museum, the high school, and various individuals and government bodies, such as some commissioners and the Harbor Advisory Board. So we really conducted a good amount of outreach. More will be coming. But I wanted to go over some of the main themes and main comments that we heard from that outreach. So most comments wanted to see public open spaces, and these ranged from natural open space to passive recreation or just gathering spaces for people to hang out. The next comment that we received the most of was no, that people did not want to see industrial uses on the site or the proposed project. Additional feedback, main feedback, including wanting to see an educational type center on the site. People also wanted to see commercial fishing uses that supported the commercial fishing industry, commercial retail in strategic locations, and improved parking and traffic in the area. So those were some of the main takeaways. There was obviously more comments that we received, but these were some of the main comments that we heard from outreach thus far. All right, now I'm going to jump into some of the main constraints on the project site. And I think this might answer some of your land use covenant questions. So this first slide here shows some of the land use restrictions on the site. So due to the previous ownership, So due to the previous ownership of this on the site and some of the existing hazardous materials uses on the site, there are land use restrictions currently located on the site. So the area hashed in red is the former tank farm site, and the areas in yellow are areas of concern for soil contamination. Site testing was done on all of these areas, and the only area that had a hazardous material issue was the former tank farm site. So the Department of Toxic Substances and Control required the preparation of a land use covenant there, which restricts uses to commercial and industrial. So that is one of the constraints on that site. I will say the land use covenant can be lifted if sufficient remediation work is done. There is none currently proposed at this time, but that would require extensive soil removal, implementation of vapor devices, and it could be costly. But I did want to note that while there is a land use covenant there, it can be lifted in the future. There is also a deed restriction on the overall power plant site. So all 107 acres has a deed restriction on the site. So that was placed by PG&E when they sold the property. So this deed restriction prohibits hotels, housing, schools, hospitals, and recreation on the overall property. So while this deed restriction exists, it can be lifted. We are seeing trends of other power plants in the state which have a similar deed restriction work with interested parties to get that lifted. And that's because a lot of these properties were owned by utility companies and they didn't want certain types of uses on them. And so, yeah, those are some constraints related to land use restrictions on the property. Sorry, it's doing this again. All right. Next, I'm going to go over some of the constraints related to the biological resources located on the site. So there's a number of biological habitats that the city identifies as protected habitats on the site. The city considers them environmentally sensitive habitats, or ESHAs. So on the property, there is dune scrub, which is located in red, kind of along the property's western boundary. There's also willow woodland and riparian habitat shown in green. There are rookeries, which are nesting sites for birds located along the property frontage. And then there is a monarch overwintering site kind of in the southeast corner of the property. So the red dotted lines outline the city's required buffers. So any development on the site in the future will need to comply with the city's buffer requirements and protection of these resources. But as you can see, the site is constrained a bit by primarily by Morrow Creek and the riparian habitat and the dune scrub on the west. So that covers some of the constraints related to biological resources. And then kind of top of mind, hazard-wise, flooding on the site. There's a significant amount of flood hazard risk on the site. So on the image here in blue is a 100-year flood zone, and in orange is a 500-year flood zone. So that really means for 100-year flood zone, that means in any given year, there's a 1% chance of a severe flood happening, and for 500-year, that's a 0.2% chance. So development on the site would need to comply with any federal and local regulations related to engineering and design, making sure buildings are put up above the flood level. It's also important for this master plan to consider siting of project and uses, making sure there's no really sensitive uses being placed on a site where a flood impact would be likely. The entire coastline here has a risk of tsunami as well. And then related to flood risks, these risks have the potential to be exacerbated in the future by sea level rise. So we conducted a sea level rise analysis in the master plan. We looked at a medium high risk scenario, which is a conservative scenario to look at. And the analysis found that there wouldn't be additional flood risks till about 2100. That's only 70 years away if you actually think about it. But at that time, it's showing that there is additional flooding risk along the Embarcadero, which could impact access to the site. So due to this, we need to really look at adaptation strategies that need to be implemented in order to make the site resilient in the future with any future development. And then the final hazard I wanted to go over is related to traffic and pedestrian and bike safety. So related to parking, there was a parking study done in 2021 that indicated a lack of available parking in the area, especially during busy weekends, and that was corroborated during all of the outreach events that we did. However, the redevelopment of the master plan property creates some opportunities to overcome those constraints. So in a lot of the public outreach, we heard support for a parking structure, public parking on the site. And Plan Morro Bay actually calls for opportunities to look at the ability to consolidate parking within this area. Traffic was also mentioned as a concern in this area. Morro Rock obviously draws in a lot of visitors to the area, and this area is a one-way in, one-way out, so people need to try to find parking and turn around, so traffic backs up in this area during busy weekends. So again, the redevelopment of the property creates additional opportunities to alleviate this issue, whether that's for connection through the project site through the back near Main Street and Quintana Road. In addition, there's a bridge, as you know, that it goes over Morro Creek that is currently only open to pedestrians and emergency vehicles. So the redevelopment of the site has the potential for bringing in financing strategies to improve the bridge to allow either one-way or two-way connections over that, and that would allow for vehicles traveling along the Embarcadero to go to Highway 1 and State Route 41 and improve circulation in the area. And Plan Morro Bay also calls for additional circulation connections within this area as well. So in addition to traffic and parking, there are safety concerns for pedestrians and bikes. There's no bike lanes on the road in this area. There are some pathways, but bikes would need to go off of the road to access those paths. In addition, there are no sidewalks on the eastern side of the Embarcadero, in addition to limited places to cross the street. So it's hard to see on this map, but there are yellow symbols showing where the crosswalks are. There's really only one crosswalk in the area, so people need to park, get out of their car. They have no sidewalks to walk to these crosswalks, so safety is a concern here in this area for pedestrians. Another constraint in this area is the lack of connections for pathways. So there is the Harbor Walk, which travels along the frontage of most of the bay in Morro Bay. However, in front of the property, the pathway stops and pedestrians are kind of forced to walk through the parking lot near the piers and the commercial uses there. There's also an existing Class 1 path, which allows bikes and pedestrians on the east side of the property. Starts at Main Street in Quintana and it goes north along Highway 1. So that's an opportunity to add new pathway connections as part of this master plan to connect paths and have a more regional connection here in the area. All right, and now based on the background of the site, all of the public outreach that was conducted, and analysis of on-site constraints, there's been drafted visions of goals and objectives as part of the master plan, and that's really why we're here tonight, is to get your feedback and comments on whether you agree with the proposed vision and objectives, or if you want to see something else, or if you don't want to see something listed. So I have some prompted questions on each of the slides coming up, so something to consider ahead of public comment and discussion. So I'll go through each of the areas, go over the vision and some of the objectives to achieve that vision. So for the Embarcadero, a vibrant northern Embarcadero featuring a mix of commercial uses that prioritize creating pedestrian connections and open spaces. So this would be implemented with pathways and viewing areas along the frontage, visitors serving commercial, so that retail, dining, recreation and fishing, commercial fishing, educational opportunities to showcase history and wildlife, and additional pedestrian connections all across the Embarcadero. The former Tank Farm site vision, which is based on site constraints and consistency with the proposed project, an area with existing hazardous materials constraints, nearby electrical infrastructure with key opportunities for industrial uses and renewable energy. So utilize existing infrastructure for strategic uses, ensure compatibility through buffers and site design, prioritize safety for any industrial use. Next is the power plant building area, which is kind of the flat graded area with the existing building and the Pacific Wildlife Care. So the vision for this area is a strategic location to support commercial retail and fishing uses along Embarcadero with amenities such as hotels, educational centers, parking, and boat facilities. So an educational center and hotel and lodging facilities, public open spaces for gathering, public parking opportunities, commercial fishing, storage, and maintenance areas, and additional vehicle access and pathway connection opportunities. And I can go back to these slides too after this. So the Scott Street Hillside area, which is located right near here, an important natural area for pathways, scenic vistas, and open space with opportunities to connect new housing with existing neighborhoods. So this area would have passive open space, benches and coastal lookouts, and opportunities for housing. And finally, Morrow Creek and Lila Kaiser Park, an ecologically and recreationally important area with opportunities for circulation improvements. Preserve and restore riparian habitat along Morrow Creek, support and upgrade existing park and sport field operations, provide vehicle access over Morrow Creek. So those are the draft goals and visions for the 5 different areas of the power plant site. And now I wanted to just open it up to discussion, public comments, and get feedback on those proposed visions. And I can go back to those slides if you would like me to.
Ryan, thanks. I'd like to go right away to public comment. Cindy, Michael, any comments to date?
I have no public comments. I think Ryan pretty clearly outlined the history so far on development of this draft master plan. And like I said earlier, what we're really hoping to get out of tonight is really an opportunity to get some feedback and input that we can use to further develop the next iteration of this draft plan.
Great.
Can I just ask a question before
Mike.
we open up public hearing? So crunching the numbers, we have 107 acres, 24 will be for BESS, 83 will be for site development, specific programming, right? So I'm going down the right road, right? So that will be the responsibility of the developer owner, the whole master plan.
This is a question for Ryan.
Yeah, whoever. Answer the question, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't want to get too site-specific with this first phase of the master plan. It's really getting a vision of the site because there's not a proposed project yet for the rest of the site. Mm-hmm. However, when that does come, they will need to, use this first phase of the master plan, the visioning, to kind of site plan a specific project in the future.
Yep, and that's why I asked at the beginning that the 107 acres will be the responsibility of the developer and or owner of this site, the whole 107 acres. True? Okay, good. So therefore, will they do an environmental impact report to cover all of the 107 acres, or are they going to break it up into pieces as they develop? You understand what I'm saying here is that it would be more efficient to try to get it all, because we haven't even gone down the rest of the site development. We've only got BESS in our hands. We don't even have the environmental impact report for BESS. So all I'm trying to get at is we're way ahead of ourselves, I think, as far as the planning, as planners. We're just trying to understand how this is going to work. Okay, and I'm trying to flush these things out.
So I can address that. Any future development and a future phase 2 of the master plan, that would require its own environmental review. But we are not talking about environmental review tonight. We are really just hoping to get some input on what is the vision? Did we get it right on the guiding goals and objectives? We've heard a lot of public comment on the open application for the battery site. What we haven't heard a lot of comment on is the other 80-some acres. And granted, yes, there is an open application that is not the subject of tonight's meeting, but we are hoping to get some public input on that balance of that site.
Yeah,
So.
and I wanted to clarify for myself before we open it up to the public what my understanding of how this is all going to work. But let me just read something and then we can move on. And this will be for the benefit of the attorney and the consultant. It it's regarding the deed restrictions or the PG&E restrictions. It says there are 107 acres that currently are under PG&E imposed restrictions. While these deed restrictions currently possess use constraints on the site, the removal of the deed restrictions is possible and would be up to the site to more uses consistent with the preferences identified by the community and interested parties. So, and you said that, Ryan, that these deed constrictions can be removed if there's the interest in doing that, but there would be money involved, obviously, if there's cleanup and all that other good stuff. So that's now, I think we're in a good place now where we could open it up, because I wanted people to
Well, I know
understand.
we're going to, yeah. So, thanks,
I thought you were going to
Mike.
open up to the public.
Not quite yet.
Okay.
So could we put the master plan on
Sure.
to kind of show? So there's 5 different areas that we're looking for comments on. And that describes those 5 areas. So commissioners, before we go to public comment, like Mike's question, any other questions specifically for Ryan? And also, I'm interested in how to conduct the public hearing.
Yeah, and
Because there's quite a few people here. We'll see how many folks
Yep.
want to speak. Could I have anybody, like everybody who'd like to speak, can you raise your hand for me?
Yeah.
So I think we want to put 3 minutes on the clock for everybody because there's 5 areas to deal with.
drill too much, Chair, but I just want to make sure our attorney and consultant are on the right page of what I was trying to get at, which is there's a lot of acreage here, 107 acres that's being developed. Then we have these site-specific areas. Now, are we going to do an EIR for the whole site, or are we going to break it up? That's all I was asking. Are we going to break it up, or are we going to do another EIR based upon the development of these other sites?
I would say that's really up to the property owner. I think ideally it would be developed as one, but I can't say how that's going to work out in the future.
Mike, thank you. Joe?
I have a couple of questions about the actual language in the document, but I think I'm going to defer that until after we've heard
Yeah,
public comment.
this would be more if we have specific questions for Ryan in the presentation method, to get to the public comment. Asia, please.
I just have one quick question. You described the topography of a couple of the sites, but I was wondering, because I'm unclear, could you describe the area in purple north of Scott Street, or what is that topography?
It's that hillside located right here where the big the tank is.
But it dips down,
It does.
right? It like goes into, and is that like a natural grade, or I don't know if you know this, or is that like a berm? Do you know if that's an adjusted floodplain?
I'm not sure if that has been adjusted in the past.
Okay.
It is not a natural grade. Part of that was regraded when the power plant was developed and constructed in the 1950s.
Okay.
There
Actually,
was World War II
It
stuff on
predates
there.
that, yeah, it predates. It was the Navy base regrading most of that.
Thank you.
And so I actually would like to tag on to your comment if you're,
Yeah. Eric?
the background of the report discusses cultural resources and discusses back through, it does mention the Navy base, but it doesn't actually talk about anything prior. And I'm just wondering, I think that the background of the site prior to the Navy's ownership should be researched and included in the report. The topography, where the Blue Line Creeks were at that time prior to them being moved around by the Navy, et cetera. I think that's something that's not part of the project, rather part of the master plan background report, and I think it might inform how we treat certain areas, or how what that topography was, where those creeks were, what the riparian areas were. I think that might be something we could research, and I think it maybe should be included in the reports. And then I have just a couple of maybe dumb questions. The outfall, which is immediately adjacent to the rock, isn't included in any of this. Is the outfall not part of the master plan? Is the outfall not part of the conditions of?
It is not. It is not part of the master plan.
Okay.
It's just the specific 107 acres.
Okay. And then I have a question about Figure 5 and Figure 7, Ryan. Figure 5 is that flood zone, 100-year, 500-year floodplain, and it shows, what it shows. But then when I go to Figure 7, it talks about the 100-year storm. So what's the difference between the 100-year floodplain and the 100-year storm? Are those the same things being described differently, or are those two different things?
I'll have to look into that.
The reason is that when I look at the sea level rise map on figure 7, it's showing plus 3.3 sea level rise feet, and it's showing that the site's not actually flooding very much. It's not flooding as much as it does now in the 100-year flood. So
They're separate. They're two separate measurements. One is like the FEMA designated floodplain, and then the storm is talking about wave inundation, is my understanding, and potential rainfall.
okay.
So, and that's different than,
Right, this is what I
Yeah.
sort of was
It's a different
assuming. But
measurement.
I think that just for the sake of the public, that if when we're showing diagrams like this that are trying to, where a person is trying to look at the site and how it's going to be affected, that you should show, if you're going to show storm on one and then show flood on the other, it's apples and oranges a little bit. I think we should probably show storm in both instances and flood in both instances, just so we have a more accurate and clear understanding of what's happening.
Eric, thanks. Other things?
Yeah, lastly, I'll bring this up later, but it's about the constraints around the site. There's other constraints around the site vis-a-vis the public initiatives, past initiatives that have passed that condition the site in different ways, and those have not been included in the master plan. And I'm wondering if perhaps we think they should be included in the master plan. And then also the mappable edges of all those underlying, there's the state lands, there's the city-owned lands, there's the leasehold versus
Yeah,
fee.
and we'll get another round of comments after public comment. But anything specifically about the presentation, like those points? Mike, you good? Asia? Joe? So if you guys agree, I'd like to open up to public comment. We're going to do it for 3 minutes. What I'd really ask everybody to do, there's a lot who want to speak, and we want to hear from you. If you could do me a favor, and when someone says something that you really like, if you could like raise your hand and wave it a little bit. And if you could also not repeat everything that everybody said before you, but there's so much to get out here, I just don't want to lessen the time. So let's put 3 minutes on the clock for each speaker, and let's go ahead and start. I'm not surprised. Terry, welcome.
Oh, just because I jump up fast. That's why I sit in the front row. Terry Simons, Mr. Chairman, Council, and citizens. So many things to talk about, so little time to talk about it. Nothing compared to the little time you're going to have. I wanted to bring in a couple of issues that may or may not be in the minds of other speakers. There is a perception of conflict of interest having a master plan developed by the same entity that's doing the EIR for the Whitehold project. And when I describe the Whitehold project, in case you don't understand, I'm talking about the BEST project, which is somehow being philosophically whiteholed from our discussions, which is ridiculous when you look at the body of the text of the staff report on the master plan, which repeatedly describes the BEST project. How can it be in the presentation described, but we can't talk about the BEST project here tonight? That's ludicrous on its face. I would like at some point to get a legal opinion on how the same entity is doing both things. Is it under the same contract? Were two separate contracts let? Was there any discussion about the potential conflict of interest having the same entity doing both contracts? Anyway, deep breath. Take a moment. Whiteholing out a already anticipated industrial use is okay with me, as long as you provide the necessary buffers, as described in one of the slides here, to protect the anticipated uses of hotels, restaurants, public serving facilities on the boundary of that white holdout project. I don't see that anywhere in the report. The anticipated project is a project that conceivably could involve large, massive quantities of highly explosive, highly toxic, and potentially environmentally dangerous materials that in most cases where they exist, a minimum of a quarter of a mile safe zone has been established around these types of facilities. I don't see how you're going to get any beneficial use out of the remainder of the project as proposed in the master plan if you don't have a reasonable buffer. And if that buffer were to be a reasonable buffer, it would preclude any future uses anticipated by this master plan. Since the same entity is providing both the EIR for the proposed Whitehold project and this one, it seems ludicrous that they would even consider representing to this commission and to the city uses that they know, based on their other work, would be precluded. Thank you.
Terry, thank you. You had many raised hands. Thank you.
Didn't come for raised hands.
Chairman and Commissioners.
Welcome.
My name is Tom Rost. I have an interest in the house at 640 Sequoia Court in Morro Bay. I practiced law for 40 years. I was a trial lawyer. I've tried cases from Florida to California. I represented and owned part of a civil engineering company across the United States, central United States. I observed that you're talking about 107 acres, and then then the staff is talking about individual owners making separate development proposals. So I don't think there's the compatibility. I think it's inappropriate until you get something that is realistic. But the most important thing is that you have the citizens of Morro Bay going to vote on this very issue of this particular area or this particular plat. And anything you do between now and after that election is a waste of time by your staff and yourself, because your citizens, you've got to listen to them, or not if you don't want to. But realistically, you need to wait till after the vote. The deed restrictions were brought up. One of the members said you got the cart before the horse. That's correct, you do. So the best thing to do tonight is to table any discussion until after the vote in November. Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much. For the record, many hands. Thank you.
I'm not going for many hands, but let's see.
Welcome anyway, Jeff.
Thank you. Regarding the use of the power plant site and looking at Table 4 and the land uses and their number of different themes, I've been in some discussions with local residents who are considering what if we could get a Scripps Institute Oceanography here, or a Woods Hole facility or institute, or a major university here. I don't see it as one of the land uses, and I'm wondering if it might be possible to add that to the list of uses, which just kind of broadens our options with that land, I think. So, and the property owners as well. So that's my comment. Thank you.
You did get a few hands, yes. Welcome. And thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and staff. First of all, welcome to the new interim director. I hope this isn't a baptism by fire, yet another one for you. First of all,
Cindy? Yeah, thanks.
I want to address the fact that you said we really shouldn't be talking about the BESS plant, the battery plant. Well, I would remind everybody that the only development proposed here in this whole presentation was the battery plant. So we have to talk about it. I think white holding it, as Terry says, is totally inappropriate. So with that, I just want to say one primary thing about this plant, and that is we have the EIR coming out, which was addressed here tonight as well, so I can talk about that. I would suggest that instead of a 60-day period, which was mentioned, that we have a 90-day period. This is a very complex, very difficult project. And if you need any proof, how about the fact that it's taken so long just to write the EIR and it keeps being delayed and delayed and delayed because there are so many issues with it. The public needs more time to review that and discuss that as well. So I would say let's do this 90-day review. And no backhands, please. So lots of hands, but no backhands, okay? A couple things. The intake building, which is part of the property, is not mentioned on the plan here. I wonder what happened to the intake building in that part of the property. There's no mention. I have quite a few questions here. I'll just go through them real quick. There's no commitment or discussion even about the developer developing the rest of the property, only the battery plant. That doesn't sit well for the rest of the property. On the remediation, it says in I read the whole presentation that wasn't provided tonight, but just it said in there that the only part of the property that will need to be that will have to be remediated is the tank farm part of the property. But if you put an industrial plant on top of it, you won't have to remediate it. It doesn't say anything about the remediation of the rest of the property, though. So, a question about how that will work. And if it's not remediated, will there just be that $3 million payment that's specified in the city agreement, where the city will have to try to do all that for a measly $3 million? The deed restriction for the use placed by PG&E. I think the other speaker addressed that, and that should have been addressed during the planned Morro Bay process, not during this. We're way behind the ball on that one. On the biological, the Otter site wasn't mentioned. The energy is no talking about where the energy is going to come from and how it's going to come into the city to be stored in the battery plant. And I'm running out of time. I've got more questions, but if I get a chance some other time, I would hope I can speak again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, others, please. Welcome.
Planning Commission, staff, Barry Brannon, Morro Bay. Well, the elephant in the room is what they call Measure A24. A24 is a measure that will be on the ballot in November. And all A24 does is talk about the land use over these specific properties. Now, I heard our presenter saying that I believe that he said that the zoning was industrial, whereas, as I understand it, at the present time, is visitors serving commercial. Maybe I misheard, but that's what I thought you said. And if it is visitors serving commercial and fishing, these land use things, the way the initiative is written, the way the measure is written, that anything that happens after May 1st of last year, between now and the election, that is different than what the voters decide cannot stand. It'll have to be reverted. So I want to underline that. So I think Mr. Rost made the point. It's wonderful to have beautiful displays, and it's nice to have the Planning Commission spend their time. But my recommendation is that you table this project, and when and after the election happens in November of this year, that if the voters decide that they want to determine what is on this property, then it'll basically be giving you a green light to do the appropriate measures that you do. But between now and then, I believe it's a total waste of your time. Thank you.
Barry, thank you. Many hands for the record. Thank you. And can I ask you, would you mind one next person who wants to speak would line up so we can just do it a little bit faster? That would help.
Thank you. My name is Jean Marie Colby. I wasn't going to speak today, but I can't help myself. So on the, a couple things on the survey, second paragraph second sentence, the first phase will focus on identifying existing conditions and constraints for the battery energy storage system area and remainder of the property and establish a conceptual vision and framework for the future physical development of the power plant property. That's, in that sentence, that pretty much makes it a given that there's going to be a battery plant. And then the whole rest of this is about how there's not going to be a battery plant because none of us want it. So I agree with the prior statements that really this should be all tabled until the vote and that the public should be brought in on all of this so that we aren't having these conflicting issues and we're not putting more time into something that's against the will of the people and against the interests here. And there's a lot more to come out when the environmental review comes out that will support what I'm saying. And secondly, I saw in the biological resources, it was kind of glossed over. There are a lot of sensitive species. We have a national estuary here. I read a report, it's called the Atlas of Sensitive Species in Morro Bay. 270 pages or something. There's something like 95 sensitive species. And it identifies each one. There's a picture, and then there's another page that has a map with the preferred habitat. The southern sea otter isn't anywhere in this presentation, but we have a significant population here with one of the quietest areas for their breeding. And I've found articles that indicate that the southern sea otter is growing back in the Morro Bay area, but statewide, it's a threatened and endangered species. And they still predict that it could be extinct. So I don't know how it ever got left out of this, but all the sensitive species here, there's also a creek that borders the property, Morro Creek, that has the steelhead trout, and they're also endangered. All of those will be affected if we don't clean up the property and treat it like a clean site. If you just leave it dirty and say, well, we're just going to put a restriction on it, it stays dirty forever. Well, when they're trying to put out those fires they can't put out, and there's water, and when there's storms, all of the contamination that's added to that site will be washed away into that Morro Creek. So I believe the study area should include the entire national estuary if we're going to talk about the batteries at all. But I really think that the whole idea of going forward with this should wait until after the vote.
Jean Marie, I'm glad you decided to speak, and you had many hands for the record. Welcome.
Hello, Nicole Dorfman, Morro Bay resident. I echo a lot of what's already been said. I think this is putting the cart before the horse. That BEST project is going to be the main thing if it happens, if it doesn't. I have a question about, since it is in a flood zone, we are talking about sea level rise. I know we used to talk about planned retreat. And I don't understand why it is logical at this point in time to build essential infrastructure in a flood zone and in a tsunami zone. We know this. We know that that plant has been flooded in the past couple of years. It just doesn't make any sense to me logically to have it in that location. 107 acres on the California coast. Wow, what a jewel. I love the fact that y'all were talking about the possibility of cleaning it up. There are many examples in California of brownfields being cleaned up and being developed into thriving parts of a community. That's my vision for it, not some industrial, dirty project, which will, if there's even one incident or a half an incident, you can say goodbye to the tourists. So we won't have to worry about all this other stuff we want to do for the tourists. But I can imagine there are a lot of people that would want their hands on this beautiful, what could be an incredible, beautiful, thriving area on the California coast. So thank you very much for your careful decision making and again, before the cart before the horse.
Nicole, thank you for your comments. Many hands, by the way. Welcome.
Hachu. Mitu Kalesi, Mamita Anatuhini. Hello, my name is Kelsey. I am speaking the language of the Chumash people of San Luis Obispo. I grew up in this area, went to Morro Bay High. My youngest still goes to Morro Bay High now. This is a very sensitive area. The entire project, I echo everything I've heard so far tonight. The concerns that have been raised, I won't say them again. Some that also haven't been mentioned are the walking dunes that are butted up right next to the tank farm area as well as another concern. Also, as you had mentioned, Eric, with the cultural resources, this hasn't been discussed. Usually it's not discussed in so much detail, but there is a very rich history of culture here and in these specific locations of these lots we're discussing today, and that has to be addressed. One of the things that I can say I support here are the ideas of what community would like to see with this land. None of it is industrial. And a big part of it is the history that we have here. For our tribe, I'm a member of Yaktichu Tichu, Yaktilhini, Northern Chumash tribe of the San Luis Obispo County and region. And we range from the Santa Maria River up to Ragged Point, out to Carrizo Plains. Morro Bay, our village here is called Sitkawa. This is a very important place to us, and we have a very high awareness of what is going on here and high interest. As a homeland tribe of a place like Morro Bay, where other tribes always gathered, it has always been a responsibility of the homeland tribe to care for people that live here, people that travel here, the plant people, the animal people, everyone. And this is a theme in our history that has continued until now. Right now, Morro Bay, our leading industry is tourism. This is something that is a responsibility that we have to our own community and to the communities that come here. And we need to protect this space. We need to figure out what do we want to do to improve and expand and grow on this. You know, tourism, fishing industry, all of the things that we can see on the Embarcadero, what is that vision? It does not include industrial. And what are we doing? Taking down the stacks just to build a battery plant? You know, someone started to mention power. We have a battery plant, power coming in, power going out. What does that look like? The footprint of a battery plant would not be limited to the lines in these maps. It's going to go out to the sea. This would give a green thumb go ahead to an offshore wind farm. I don't want to see that. I know a lot of people don't want to see that. It's going to go into the land because the power has to get funneled towards people somehow. That is going to impact so much more. Thank you. Ow, ow.
Oh, Kelsey, thank you so much for being here. For the record, very many hands. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Judy Ann Cross, citizen of Morro Bay. It sounded like the deed restriction talked about no hotels or schools, but then part of the vision sounded like it talked about a hotel and educational centers. So I'm hearing some conflicting, confusing things there. And I was really surprised to hear something about housing in the Scott Street Hillside area, because that to me doesn't sound like visitors serving commercial. And last thing I want to say is that I'm 100% against the BES, and I think we should be discussing it tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Many hands for the record. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Karen Aguilar, and I'm a resident of Morro Bay. Whenever I take walks down on Embarcadero and I look at the stacks, I think about a very old, antiquated type of energy use. We are now stuck with 3 stacks that we have to figure out how to take down, and because it's got asbestos in it, it's going to cost the city a lot of money. So are we looking long-term about the possibility of a BES plant here? Because as we know, the energy that we're creating now is a technology that's rapidly changing. So are we going to be stuck 30 years down the road with another antiquated form of energy that the city will have to figure out how to clean up? And the one thing that's not being said about this BES plant that we're not supposed to be talking about tonight, I was listening to what Terry Simon said at another meeting, and it really sent something home. We're not even talking about the security of this town and the threat of terrorism. He talks about Diablo Canyon and how very regulated that is. And it's monitored 24/7. Who's going to monitor the BES plant? Who's going to be responsible for monitoring the BES plant and the threat of what that would mean? And finally, we had flooding last year where we got landlocked in this town. What happens if there's an emergency because of a fire that happens? How are we going to evacuate our town? And if we're supposed to close our windows, there's a lot of homes in this town that don't have modern windows. So they're not going to be saved from closing their windows up and staying in their homes. So there's a lot of different issues that were not brought up today about the issue we're not supposed to talk about. So I just wanted to give you my opinion. Thank you.
Karen, thank you for talking. Very many hands, Karen. Thank you. Welcome. Love to hear your name if you're willing.
Good evening. Linda Donnelly, resident of Morro Bay for about 50 years. I want to speak to the injection wells that will be put on that property. The city now is looking to put injection wells for the recycled water that we don't have yet at a recycling plant. And coastal hazards, you know, what we could just keep going on. Mixing a battery plant, mixing with salt water, regular water, it doesn't matter, I don't know. We don't have a fire department that's trained for any of this. I'm trying to speak to things that maybe somebody hasn't mentioned. You know, the tsunami risk. But to the flooding last year, it split this town in half. Nobody could get anywhere, in or out. We have substations that the 3 windmill companies who have come into town, is what I've heard. They're getting offices here. They each have to have their own substation, which, to someone else's comment, you know, these are for the windmills that we also don't want as a town. I mean, maybe I'm being bold and speaking as a town, but, you know, totally against the best. I think there's a lot of people here that don't want to see this. Why would we want to put a bomb on our front yard with nowhere to go? If it blows up, if it mixes with seawater or water, we cannot put it out effectively at this moment, you know? Even when it's probably built, how many people does it take to put it out, and you can't use water, so. I don't know. There's a lot to think about. This isn't the time to be looking at this right now. There's an EIR that's been pushed back for months, maybe a year or so. So let's ask ourselves a lot of these questions, that the town has other projects going on that have to do with this property. So at what point do we mitigate all this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the record, very many hands. Jeff, welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners, city staff, and neighbors. My name is Jeff Eccles, resident of North Morro Bay. Welcome to our interim director, Michael. It's good to see you. The city's fortunate to have you. This is exciting. For the last 20 years, I've hoped for substantive discussion and thinking by the citizens and our leadership for this site, because this site is so important to the city. It's to call it a catalyst site is barely doing it justice. So it's an opportunity for us to use our imagination, to use our agency as a community, to really determine what we want to look like in the future for us and our children. My kids are graduates of Morro Bay High as well, and I want them to enjoy this area for decades. So it was interesting in the presentation that was given by Ryan, there was very little mention that this property is in the coastal zone. So it's in the coastal zone, which means it's subject to the Coastal Act. And we'll need approval. This master plan will need approval by the Coastal Commission. So there were some things that Ryan mentioned in his report that were relative to that. If you read the Coastal Commission and how they approve their projects, they have a hierarchy of conditions that they look for. Some deal with constraints. The environmentally sensitive habitat was mentioned. Coastal hazards and flooding was mentioned. Also, they look for objectives, goals and objectives. Public access, of course, is a big one that was mentioned. One that wasn't mentioned at all, though, is coastal dependent. The use of the property should be coastal dependent. There is an area in this plan that is carved out, I'm not sure why, seemingly for industrial use when the current zoning is visitor serving commercial. Furthermore, that industrial use has absolutely nothing to do with coastal dependency. A best plant, there are hundreds of them going up and down the state of California right now and across the nation. To put an industrial use that is not coastal dependent in this space, A, just doesn't make sense, it's nonsensical, and B, I think is not going to fly with the Coastal Commission whatsoever. So I think there are some flaws that have been pointed out in the process tonight. One, that industrial use. Two, there's a citizens initiative that is coming to the ballot in November. So I agree with the comments that have been made up to this point that tabling this issue until after the election would be the wisest and most prudent direction for the city. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you very much. For the record, very many hands. Hi, Jeff.
Jeff Heller, thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff, and thank you, Rincon. This is great work here. Very exciting. One thing which I think applies to all 5 of the sites here that's mentioned under circulation, which is key from a safety standpoint for however the sites get developed, which is something I think we've talked about for many years and wanting, which is expanding the bridge over Morrill Creek for vehicle connections. I don't know the answer to this, but if there's some way we can link this to the development of whatever happens there to ensure that we get it from the developers as opposed to residents paying for it. It's a great need. I think it's probably the most important safety piece in the whole circulation concept. So I don't know how to do that and make it part of a requirement, but I just think it's super important. I just wanted to express that tonight. And Michael, welcome. Thank you for helping us out this interim period. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff, very much. Others, please come forward. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Rachel Wilson. I'm a kayaker from Cayucas, and I've been fortunate to be on vacation a lot lately. And nothing says welcome to a community more than putting a prison-like structure with barbed wire on your waterfront with guard towers. It just says ambiance, yes, welcome to Morro Bay. I went by one of those sites in another community, and by gosh, it was barbed wire, it was buildings, and there were guards who came out to say hello when we stopped to take pictures. I personally would not want to sit on a beach right across from guard towers. It just doesn't have the level of ambiance. I just got back from Jakarta. That's worse ambiance than the poverty in that town. Thank you.
Very direct and very many hands. Others? So far, I want to thank you all. The comments have been really direct and not repetitive. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, Gary Johnson. I live 2 blocks from this mass thing over here. Anyway, welcome everybody. I mean, this is a great discussion. I've been away from this for a couple of years, and now I'm getting back into it. Now, why am I getting back into it? I'm a failure analysis engineer for the space program for 40 years. I've been involved in research for 12 years, so I got pretty good credentials because I've solved a lot of problems with the space program and for the satellite programs. Now, with that said, I'm just saying that this is one of the world's largest storage facilities within a block of neighborhood where hundreds of people are living near in Morro Bay High School. And after doing my research on this subject several years ago, it was my opinion this is not the right place to put a dangerous lithium storage facility. Now, I am in the battery, I'm not against the lithium battery technology. It's here, it's everywhere, it's in our cars, it's in all of our utensils that we use, everything. But the facility this large, it can't handle it. The technical literature that I have been reading states that a storage facility this large is not well-developed technology, and that's true. There's not enough, currently not enough data to experience the availability of this understanding, the possibility of this site. Now, let's get down to the nut and bolts of this thing. It could be a modular, it's a modular design, it could be a good one. Now, in my failure analysis over these programs, they taught me years ago when I was working for all of these PhDs in research, Gary, most of the time when there's a failure, somebody does something stupid. When they do so, it's not the design, it's stupid. So what I'm saying is, lithium batteries are very sensitive to mechanical damage because we could witness that in Florida when they pulled those cars out and they started on fire because the lithium doesn't like water. And lead poisoning and exposure. Now, the facility could be near earthquake fault. If and when the tsunami hits the area, we're all in trouble. That's been stated just behind me. Remember, the decision was made to move the sewer system because of the tsunami storage facility is at sea level. And also, there's a chemical. Now, I don't know what the present design is because when we had that meeting here over there at the community center, they had this module. Now, one of the things I says, where is the motherboard? Oh, we don't have the design yet. What do you mean you don't have the design yet? Here you're showing me this huge modular, and I'm here to look at this. Okay, I'm here to look at this thing, and you don't have a design yet? So I'm just saying, for last comment, that they don't have a design yet, then we're in trouble because, and also, last and not least.
You have to wrap up.
Okay. Just don't look at the batteries. Anything that goes in there, we got to be sure we don't have toxic chemicals.
Thank you.
Don't let them squeeze that in there on you. Thank you.
Definitely appreciate your comments. Many hands. Others. And if you don't mind, kind of come right up so we can kind of roll through.
I was writing what I
You were
wanted to
trying,
say.
I know.
Right, sorry. Betsy Gaudette Cross. I'm a
Welcome, Betsy.
Morro Bay resident. I won't repeat what's being said, but when we were collecting signatures, I talked to hundreds of people. I might have had 5 people who were in favor of putting the BESS here. So why would we go against the citizens of Morro Bay when we're the ones who have to live here? People say, well, you know, they own the property. They can do whatever they want with the property. Well, that's not true because I can't put a restaurant in my house because I'm zoned residential. I mean, so you have regulations and therefore they can't do whatever they want. Visitors serving commercial is not a BESS power plant. They could sell the property. You know, people say, well, there's all of this redevelopment, fixing the property that's damaged by the tank farms and whatever. There are so many people out there with billions of dollars, big corporations, that cleaning up that little area would be minimal to what they could reap from having that property. It's a prime piece of real estate. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Betsy. Others who would like to speak? We're losing our audience. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Natalia Merzouin. And I just wanted to say, I know this was all initiated in the name of green energy, and I want to bring this up because I understand that there's a movement abroad to make almost anything happen as long as you use that as an excuse, the green energy. And the first comment that I wanted to make, and I want you to check this, don't believe me. There was a man that died recently named Morris Strong, spelled like Maurice Strong, but pronounced Morris Strong. He was a Canadian, junior high school dropout. And he made himself a billionaire in the Canadian oil patch after his collaboration with some wealthy mentors like David Rockefeller. And he is largely responsible for what you can call the modern green movement. And you can decide for yourselves if you think his qualifications are what we would like to see in something that's really changing the whole world. But I urge you to look into him. And another thing, as far as the affordability of this whole thing, starting with the wind farm, Warren Buffett is highly invested in wind energy, and I just heard him say from his own mouth on television, the only reason that wind energy is happening now is because of subsidies. And essentially all the subsidies come from we the people. And, we need to move on to something that works better and that is really green and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you for yet a new point and many hands. And if someone could come up behind Betty, if there's another person who wants to speak. Welcome, Betty.
Good evening, Betty Winholtz. I would like a clarification on the actual number of acres that we're speaking to for this reason, and part of it may be my misunderstanding. I think part of the 107 acres includes the PG&E switchyard. I believe part of the 7 acres includes what was mentioned earlier, the drilling of the wells. Does it include the RV park, which used to belong to the property owner, or does that now owned by the city, I believe? And then is Lila Kaiser owned by the city, or do we still lease it from the property owner? So I think that this 107 may not be an accurate figure. And then that would go for the bike lane as well. And in terms of the bluff up to Scott Street, is that really something that's buildable, or is like, we say it's there, but you really can't touch it because of the steepness of it? So I think if you would clarify that, and then I would affirm without repeating that I support the idea that this is so not ready to go before anyone because of the Measure A and because of you can't, someone said it so well earlier, and so I guess I'm going to repeat it, that we're planning for this white hole, and yet it needs to have a buffer, but you want us to give you ideas about what to put around the buffer or in the buffer, and that's not possible. So then there's the Measure A, which means there won't be a white hole, and so we can really talk about the whole facility, and yet you won't let us talk about the whole project. So, yeah, please delay.
Betty, thank you very much. For the record, very many hands. Final speakers, and if I don't see anybody, I'm going to go to the Zoom. Anthony, do we have anybody in the queue?
Thank you, Chair Roshan. Currently, I do see one hand raised. Jonathan Duran. Go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and give your testimony, please. Thank you.
Welcome, Jonathan.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello. Yes, name's Jonathan Duran. I am a representative with the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters, cover Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo area. Have a lot of members that would live and reside within the area of this upcoming development. And from what I've heard so far from other comments, again, it's a project, and we oppose this project moving forward. We believe that it should have some type of skilled and trained and some type of local hire clause within the parameters of this project and the development as a whole, because it is a large piece of property, like you've heard before from some of the other comments, where, hey, it's prime real estate. And the best way to help the community is to put people within the community to work. It is my strong belief that the city should require projects to be built with contractors that hire local, pay prevailing wage, and utilize apprenticeships from a state certified apprenticeship program. These workforce requirements not only reduce the related environmental impacts, but also benefit the local economy and workforce development. In fact, in a recent 2020 report titled Putting California on the High Road, Jobs and Climate Action Plan of 2030 by California Workforce Development Board, concluded investments in growing, diversifying, and upskilling California workforce can positively affect returns on the mitigation of climate mitigation efforts. So for the most part, it's, again, we oppose the overall development of the BIS battery storage. And we believe it's essential, if it is going to be moved forward, that it should have some type of language within the city or the property itself is having a skilled and trained accredited apprenticeship program and utilizing local residents, contractors, and have opportunity to be able to put people to work within San Luis Obispo County and also in the local Morro Bay and outlying areas. Thank you so much for your time.
Jonathan, thank you for calling in. And just to let you know, we did receive your document and letter. All the commissioners had a chance to look at it. Thank you very much. Anthony, no one else in the queue?
Thank you, Chair Roshan. Currently, I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
So I think we've done well tonight. What I'd like to do is take a 5-minute break. I'm going to close public comment before we break, and I want to give some real thought to this, where we go from here. So commissioners, be ready to do some hard work here. And Michael and Cindy, too, I have some questions for you. So we'll see where we go from this point. So we'll be back in right around, 7:47. Who are we missing? Thank you, Chris. Welcome back, everybody. Commissioners, let me know when you're ready. So welcome back. If I could ask everybody to take their seats, we'd like to resume the hearing. Thank you all so much for staying with us. That was a very valuable comment period. So thank you really a lot for that. And I thought we covered a lot of ground. So thank you. What I'd like to do is start in response. I've taken notes. I think all the commissioners have, but we'd like to start. I know Cindy was aggressively taking notes, but if we could start with Cindy and kind of hear where we are, and from there we can maybe get responses from Ryan as well. But I'd rather you set the table to begin with.
Sure, that sounds great. And yes, we got some great comments. I'm glad that we had so many people that were able to come out tonight and provide their public input. And just to kind of, keep our eyes on the big picture here, this is, a study session. It's not a public hearing. We really, as I said before, we have heard lots of public comments about the community's feelings about the battery project. This, as a master plan, is really kind of looking at the things that we haven't heard yet, which is what do we see as our vision for the balance of that site. I want to emphasize that, some of the comments, about is it too soon or should things be tabled or things like that, and just that there will be an opportunity when the project comes forward for public hearing review of the entitlement applications, which is anticipated to be sometime this summer, and that will allow the city to make a determination on the status of those applications. But that's not the focus of tonight. The focus of tonight is just comments on the master plan, and then also just to remind everyone that our general plan, local coastal plan, does require that if any development application is submitted to the city has a legal requirement to process that. So under the general plan policy, it does say that there must be a master plan. So what we're doing tonight is we're following our general plan. We're working in parallel fashion to the pending application so that when it is ready to come for a future decision, then we've done the work on the master plan. And part of this is the community outreach. So this is great. We're hearing a lot of public comment, and we're, as you said, we're taking copious notes and compiling all of this information.
Right. Michael, would you want to add anything to this? I know you're new, and so we're not going to push too hard.
That's what I'm doing here tonight is listening and trying to understand the issues of concern. Definitely hearing those loud and clear, and we'll try to support the deliberations or discussion of the Planning Commission to the best of our ability.
Fantastic. Commissioners, well, maybe Ryan, do you have some quick responses in terms of general things you might want to mention before the commission starts to consider the comments?
Not too much else to add. I do appreciate some of the feedback that we got from the public, specifically related to some of the roadway improvements and an idea for an education center and a university. But yeah, nothing further to add there.
Great. Commissioners, we can comment. Go ahead.
Yes, and if I may, I have a few quick responses.
Oh, of course. Yeah, please.
Sure. There were some questions and issues raised with respect to questions of a conflict of interest. Can you hear me okay?
Maybe a little closer. Yeah.
Okay. There were some questions raised with respect to a conflict of interest. Rincon are not decision makers. They are, merely working on different aspects that overlap on the same project. They're not the policymakers, they're not the decision makers, and looking at that, and that's fairly typical too, to have one consultant doing overlapping work in terms of entitlements and CEQA. That is not uncommon at all, but it does not present a legal conflict of interest. In terms of the comments made about waiting until after a measure vote, talking about the policy issues and talking about the long-term planning is in no way prejudicing a measure or moving forward with a measure. And along those same lines, the master plan, along with the CUP or the the CEQA that will be presented for consideration at public hearings anticipated in the summer or springtime, that is when the full impacts could be addressed in conjunction with Measure 824. And I
say that last part again.
Any kind of entitlements along with CEQA that will be presented for consideration at upcoming public hearings that are anticipated currently for spring or summer, that would be the time at which you would have a better analysis of the full impacts that could be addressed as they relate to the measure as we get closer to that measure in time. But there's absolutely nothing in these policy conversations, these mere public input conversations, these study session conversations that prejudice the measure in any way. I want to be very clear about that. There was also several public comments relating to white holding or limiting public comment. Obviously, we did not limit public comment. What we're trying to do is we're preserving the commission's independence in terms of future decision-making processes.
You're saying that in specific reference to why we said not to discuss the battery storage, the BESS project in specifics. So that's where you're responding. There's a legal requirement for the commission not for the public, but for us.
That's right. That is for the commission's preservation of its independence in terms of further decision-making that will be coming down the pipeline. And frankly, for protection against possible bias legal challenges.
And let me offer to the public, just to make sure, and you can tell me if I'm accurate. The reason is if we predetermined what the applicant value of a project before we've heard it, that would show a prejudice that could require a recusal. And I've even seen it where the whole commission would have to recuse because of that kind of misstep. So we're being very careful about that. Am I accurate?
That's right. That's absolutely accurate. And that's why I want to emphasize at the beginning that the appropriate time for the decision making on the details of the project for the commission is after there has been a presentation of the full panoply of evidence.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any questions for staff or the attorney? Michael.
First Cindy, and then I'm going to go to the attorney. When was the draft power plant master plan first made available to you, to staff, to give it to us? I received it last Thursday, so a lot of stuff to do before a holiday weekend. So I just want to know, when was it first made available to staff?
To staff?
Yeah, to you.
So it was published in the Planning Commission packet on Thursday.
Yeah, I got it.
I don't have it top of mind when it was first emailed to me by Ryan, if that's what you're
And the only other reason I asked that is because it's dated March 2024. So we're not even in March yet. So I like to kind of fix those kind of things,
Okay.
All right, number
duly
one.
noted.
Yeah, no, I'm just, I'm wondering what's going on here, Should I have even gotten it? I was going to give it back because it was dated wrong.
Yeah, I think that's just a typo.
Okay, and by the way, I did talk to the chair on Friday about needing legal support at this meeting. We knew we were going to need it, but he did advise me Friday that we were going to have legal counsel here, so thank you. I knew we didn't need it. Now I'd like to just ask some specific questions about.
Let's for now keep specific questions.
Really, because it'll clarify a lot. To staff
and then we'll all begin to go the next step.
Only because this is a big deal. I think this is a real big deal. So I crunched numbers earlier. We have 107 acres that are being developed. Okay. It all started with the power plant, 24 acres, correct, Cindy? When the requirement to do a master plan started with the 24 acres.
It started with the application to develop 24 of the 107.
Now, obviously, when you're in the business there and you have to file with the PUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, to allow you to do that. Now, who filed that application? I know the answer because I've already asked that before.
I don't know who filed that, and it's really not the subject of.
Well, let me just clarify. PG&E filed it. So what I'm saying is there's 107 acres of covenants and restrictions by PG&E as well. So, I'm trying to, there's a lot of parties here. PG&E has the ultimate authority given to it by the state of California through the PUC to do what it's doing. Vistra did verify that, by the way. Vistra actually sat up there and said, yeah, PG&E did it. So I want to make sure we understand all the parties that are involved. So we have 107 acres. They will be the owner and the developer, right? The owner and the developer will be the same person, which will be Vistra, I believe.
Well, no, I don't think that's right.
Okay, well, I'm asking the question.
Well, the owner of the property, I mean, I don't know if we need these clarifications, but the owner of the property is Vistra. But Vistra is not necessarily the developer of the property. And that's why we're doing the master plan.
It said here, right? It says here that because of the policy states that the master plan will be the responsibility of the property owner upon development. So Vistra will ultimately be responsible for the master plan development. It's right in the report. I mean, it's right on page number 2. So I just want to clarify what we're.
Let's listen to Cindy and Michael.
So what you're quoting is from the general plan policy, LU 5.4. Yes. So that's a screenshot of our Plan Morro Bay document. Currently, Vistra owns the property, and they are the applicant for the battery energy project, which is on 24 acres. The policy is a general policy statement that identified that that was written when the Plan Morro Bay was adopted in 2021, and at that point, Vistra did not own the property. It was owned by Dynegy. The policy was crafted to provide some flexibility, whether it's the developer or the property owner. In this case, the property owner, Vistra, has filed for an application. So, it's a little semantics, but they are the property owner, and because of their development application that has triggered the requirement for a master plan, and we are doing this in tandem with the pending application that is not the subject of tonight.
I'm just going to have 2 more questions. I'll move on. The reason I'm asking these questions, specific questions, because we have 107 acres we've got to develop right now. So, but let me ask the question. How many opportunities has the Planning Commission had to review this project so far? I know the answer to that one too. I just want to clarify.
When you say this project, Mike, what do you mean?
Vistra and or the whole development. Vistra 24107. Have we ever had the opportunity to review this proposal before a project?
We have not yet, and just to clarify, we're not developing 107 acres tonight. It is really just a development application for 24 acres. We do not have any development applications for the rest of the property, which is why we're breaking it out into 2 phases. We've discussed this approach with the Coastal Commission, by the way, and they are supportive of the 2-phased approach. But definitely, this is, you are correct, this is a very important project for the city. The ability to do a master plan, it represents a tremendous opportunity for the city and its residents to plot a vision and a course forward on how they would like to see a master plan for the site. And so that is why we brought it forth to the Planning Commission, so that we can get the weigh in on the Planning Commission's input.
Yeah, and then the reason I asked is because on page number 16 of their plan, it states that some planning commissioners were interviewed. Then, do you know who those people were? I would have loved to get an interview.
Those were people who would have attended the
no,
Joe,
these were separate interviews.
So
who are those people?
RINCON can answer that. That this is a master plan that RINCON has drafted up for the city, and they have the contract.
Yeah, because I'd like to know who if they're even here still, because we had turnover.
Commissioner King, I had a phone call with her. We had a discussion.
So one commissioner?
One commissioner.
Because it has on here that the planning commissioners. So one commissioner, we might want to put plural on there. So I just want to just get it for the record. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Any comment?
Oh, that was the survey.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, that was the survey that I think the city council, some city council members, some public advisory board members, and other stakeholders in the community. So it was one of the aspects of community engagement.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. You were the newest planning commissioner, but they didn't reach out to the most, experienced, Bill. I don't think they reached out to you or me. So I just wanted to say that for the record.
Well, I'm just the most interesting.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, so.
I would have picked you
That
too.
is true, yeah. Okay, any other questions specifically for staff? Joe?
Yeah, I have just a couple of specific questions. The first one's for Ryan. I want to be clear that we're discussing phase 1, but phase 2 requires that the balance of the property there actually be a project for that. And before that, and there will be no phase 2 before and only if that happens. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. The other question, I think it's around page 52. It talks about how a majority of the people who participated in the forum, and there were about, I think it was about 80, and there was about 600 people who expressed an opinion in a survey, and then there were some interested parties as well, the Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, et cetera. And it says that among the interested parties, presumably they had a minority opinion because there were some of the interested parties that actually supported the proposal. So my question is there a number that's available? This minority support among the interested party, is that 20, 15, 5? Is there any I'm looking for some sort of comparison between who supported and who didn't. Do you have any?
With regards to the proposed project? Or,
yeah.
I have the numbers, not off the top of my head, but I can look that up and provide that to you. But it was significantly lower than 600 people taking the survey. It was probably closer to, say, 15 or 16, like you said.
Is a minority of some sort. Okay, and then I note that minority opinion viewed the site as a strategic location for renewable energy. And so we should take that statement of renewable energy as synonymous with the BEST project, or is the renewable energy a much broader contract that could accommodate the BEST project, but it could accommodate other things as well?
Feedback from them was a more broad statement of renewable energy. It wasn't specific to the battery project.
Okay, and then my last question is for Lana. Again, I'm trying to understand the land use covenant of 2006 was between PG&E, who was no longer the owner, and the government agency. Is there any explanation as why they sought this agreement from someone who was not the owner?
So, first of all, they're going to seek an agreement anytime they have a indication through preliminary investigations that remediation is needed. Now, it's sort of similar to the CEQA questions. I have not looked at the covenant. I'm familiar with the deed restrictions and the covenant restrictions, but we have not looked at it into detail because, frankly, the city attorney's office does not go down the path of looking at hypothetical project situations. And the deed restrictions, as Ryan said earlier, the deed restrictions, the covenant restrictions can be waived in the future, but the manner and how that would happen, we would have to just speculate on in terms of how that would happen based on what the project would be. Depending on the project that comes in, how it would drive how that area would be remediated, and how the removal of the deed restrictions or other recorded restrictions, I'll just call them recorded restrictions, would be removed from the property. At this point in time, it's premature, and that's why I said earlier, specifically dealing with the specifics of those restrictions would be something that you would deal with more with a specific application once you have information about a specific remediation plan.
I can appreciate fully. I think you're making more of my question than it actually was. I'm just curious as to why the land use arrangement wasn't with the title owner, Vistra, presumably in 2006, or whoever owned the property in 2006, why it was not with them, but rather with PG&E.
I think I can provide some clarification on that. It's my understanding that when PG&E sold the property, they retained the underlying responsibility for that, and so they were required. They were the responsible party for that, and that's why it's with PG&E and not with Vistra.
And that's why it's a deed restriction. It came with the sale.
So under CERCLA, DTSC and other remedial agencies don't just deal with the direct immediate owner. They deal with, as you spoke to, they deal with responsible agencies. If you have something that's a highly toxic site, those responsible agencies can be a huge number of people, and some of them haven't been there for hundreds of years. So again, without knowing all the details of how that responsible agency DTSC process shook out.
Yeah, Joe, and if I might intervene, I don't know if this is going to be productive right now.
Oh, no,
my other question is, I don't think the city attorneys really get involved in negotiations around deed restrictions on specific properties.
I've dealt with brownfields before. So
right.
I'm familiar with CERCLA, but I'm not familiar with this particular CERCLA issue.
Right. I'm not even sure the city attorney would do it. I mean, I don't.
You've answered my question. I think you were making more of my question. I simply wanted to know.
Got it.
Why.
Other
and your answer was
Joe?
informative. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Asia.
I think I'll wait for our discussion to answer more questions. Or ask
Eric, any questions?
It's kind of abstract.
Give it a try.
For Laura, sorry.
Is it a question or a comment?
Question. The comments tonight revolved around uses on this site, like education, like housing, and et cetera. And those are in conflict with the current zoning on the site. And I have to be careful how I articulate this. There's an initiative which is out there, and the text of that initiative discusses the city's responsibilities, and we as actors for the city have certain responsibilities to the city and to our citizens, and so it's this internal conflict we have to fight over. Is there any, I guess the only thing that becomes a problem is action. If we take an action that's contrary to the text of the initiative, then we are suddenly in a problem area, or are we in conflict?
So are you asking the city attorney?
City attorney.
Okay.
Are we in conflict by the discussion of these different things, or is it only if we take an action, and at what level is an action in conflict?
You want to go?
So I'll say from the zoning part of that answer, and then I'll let Lana speak to the legal side of things. There is no conflict. The initiative is not yet passed. Tonight we are just asking for a public comment on this master plan. We are following our own general plan policies. We are trying to move forward with the processing of what's before the city, and in this case tonight is the master plan. Yes, the current zoning, the current land use is visitor serving commercial, and the zoning will be certified next month to change that to visitor serving commercial. The master plan can envision a change of uses, and that master plan would spell out, based on community input, what those future land uses should be. And that may include a discussion of, potential changes to land use. But if in the future an initiative is passed that locks in the land use, then that would be for the assistant city attorney to address. Then what happens?
Then that measure language would basically overwrite the language with the zoning and general plan language that was previously adopted. I mean, that's, I guess, the best way to think of a planning and zoning measure like the one that's being discussed tonight, is that we could pass the master plan and a general plan amendment and new zoning tomorrow, and if there is a measure that passes in January of 2025 or whenever, it'll overwrite it. It'll overwrite it.
I have a couple of quick questions. I wanted to start with Rincon and Ryan. Part of the questions tonight showed a number of omissions or areas in the master plan that looked underdeveloped, but also unattended to. If I just ask you, you can kind of give me a response. Is that to come? How you want to fit it in? But one of the big ones was the cultural issues on the site. It was brought up by a number of people very articulately. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, I apologize for not including that in the presentation. It is included a discussion within the draft master plan document itself. We also didn't want to, have specifics on locations because those are sensitive items, but that discussion.
But there's still ways to talk about it without giving specific locations.
Yeah, it is discussed in the master plan, but I apologize for not including it in the presentation this evening.
Okay, so that, for me, that's a substantial omission as well. So I would want to get some confidence of how you're going to address that. I think the other thing was environmental discussions. Is there any way to sort of make them, how can I say, applicable to the master plan?
Yeah, certainly. We primarily focused on the biological resources on the site or nearby that would be impacted by the site. The sea otter discussion brought up in the estuary was important, so we'll make sure to include some of that pieces.
So more to come, or we just haven't gotten to that point?
Yeah, more to come.
Issues around coastal development. There were a couple of questions, including conflicting language and conflicting zoning. How will the master plan address those?
We have a discussion in the constraints section that talk about coastal zone applicability, as well as some land use, consistency with land use discussion. So there is a discussion about Coastal Act compliance.
So I guess what I'm emphasizing is these are comments I heard from the audience, and they're actually comments I agree with.
Okay.
Tourism. How is tourism going to be digested and integrated into the master plan?
I would say it would be incorporated in some of the action items, as well as some of the land use visioning mapping that is to come as part of the final draft master plan.
And last, I have a question on schedule, and this is probably for Rincon and for Cindy. Quite a few of the questions tonight were about how do we integrate this? And it's integration with an EIR that's coming out. It's integration with a application that will be filed. And it's an integration with Measure A. All of these things, is there timing in terms of what makes the master plan more timely, more valuable, more applicable? Is there a way, and I'm asking both of you, that the timing can be integrated into future pieces so we sort of see a respect on how to make decisions from the public relative to the timing of all these different pieces?
So I can address that. So as far as the immediate question of timing, and this was discussed in the staff report, what will happen after tonight's meeting, we're hearing comment from the public, we're hearing, input from the Planning Commission. We will take that public comment back and we will use that to further develop the draft master plan. And then our next opportunity for public input, there are some flyers at the back of the room, and I gave each of the planning commissioners a flyer.
March 27.
Yeah, we will put this on the website here, but what it is a second community workshop that will be held on March 27th, right here in this room from 6 to 8 p.m. And that will be an opportunity to have some roundtable discussions.
And can you offer to the audience tonight, how does that respond to this additional information? In other words, it's very, a number of comments, and it's truly difficult to separate the two completely.
Right. And so, yes, thank you for the question. So how we will address that is we will address it by, one, keeping the master plan separate from the planning applications and the EIR. And the EIR will be released in what I said earlier was about 2 to 4 weeks. We are wrapping it up now, and we know that the public has a large interest in reviewing that document, and so we are endeavoring to get that out as soon as possible. There will be public comment opportunities for the EIR. The way the process works is we cannot commingle the master plan with the EIR. That will have its own separate public review times. There will, when the EIR public review process is complete and we've had an ability to do a response to comments on the EIR, then we will bring it back to the Planning Commission. We anticipate either late spring or early summer to commence public hearings on the coastal development permit and the other, planning permits that are needed in tandem for the overall project. And that will also include with it the EIR, and then at that point, the master plan draft, phase one.
Thank you. Anything, Ryan?
I think we're trying to aim for, the master plan will also go out for a draft public review period as
But
well.
I'm asking, is there ability to adjust the schedule around the comments that we heard tonight?
Yes.
Cindy, does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Joe?
Did I just hear then that the second public forum on the power plant master plan will occur at about the same time that the EIR is released?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm concerned about overloading the public in their ability to respond cogently to these complicated things.
That'll be part of our discussion. Yeah. So, I mean, we just heard what Cindy and Ryan are thinking.
Yeah. And through the chair, I just want to
Mike?
For the public's benefit, we almost got in trouble at our last meeting because we didn't respond to the public, but Ms. Winholtz did talk about the 27-acre PG&E switch yard. So that's not in there, so that won't be part of the 107 acres.
Right, that is.
Let's just clarify.
Yeah, that is
for Ms.
correct.
Winholtz.
It is 107 acres. The switch yard is not included in
That's
the
right.
107. Neither is the mobile home, or the RV park, excuse me.
Okay, good.
And yes, I do understand that we have a coalescing of events in that we are both working on a master plan that has its own project timelines, and then we are also working on reviewing the EIR and the applications. And some of these, in order to kind of tee them all up so that they can go to Planning Commission, there will be some inevitable overlap of those, and we will endeavor to make sure that we don't miss out on opportunities for public comment.
And for Ryan's benefit, Ryan, because at the end of the report it asks, so what can we do to make this better? I think one of our audience members as well, Jeff Heller, brought up the community and public benefits. I think we ought to work those into this. I didn't see any.
So Mark, we're gonna get there.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Asia, you had a question?
Sorry, can I just clarify the EIR that's going to be completed, coming up, that's happening around the same time as this public meeting, is for only one certain section of the property in question. It's not for the
It's for 24 acres of the 107. Is that right?
EIR being completed because for any other section of the property at this point.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
I just was wanting to clarify the portion of the property that's an EIR is being completed for. It's not the entire piece of property.
So the EIR does include in the project description that the project description is for construction of the battery energy storage project, demolition of the power plant, demolition of the 3 stacks.
So
Also includes the master plan insofar as that it is triggered by the development application, and it will include all of that. But it is not for the whole entire 107 acres. It is really just for the scope of what the project is.
Okay, but it
And
does.
the project is BESS.
And the project is the battery energy storage project and the other components that I mentioned. And remember, I mean, the whole reason we are here tonight for the master plan is because of that general plan policy that says the applicant, that any type of development, I mean, we could have gotten a hotel application near the Scott Street Hillside area. That would have triggered a requirement for a master plan. It just so happens that we have an application for a battery energy storage system. And so by our general plan policy requirements, we are required to do a master plan for the site. Now, because we don't have development for all 107 acres, what the Coastal Commission has told us is that it would be acceptable to phase it out into 2 phases because we don't know what the balance, what that's going to look like. So we are doing a high-level planning approach and just really, you know, at this point, just really wanting to get some public input on the master plan. We will have public opportunities for the environmental impact report and the planning permits.
Okay, and so then I have a couple questions for Ryan. Going back to what's typically included in a master plan like this, do you typically, I guess you wouldn't map out utilities, but do you typically have like a landscape review of what utility infrastructure exists on the site, or is that something that happens with project proposals later on?
Yeah, that would be occur under phase 2 when there's more a project proposal, more specifics on the size of what uses are proposing, their location. We don't have that information now. So really, this master plan is trying to establish a vision that the property owner will try and follow to upon future redevelopment.
Okay. My next 2 questions are around areas in the entire property where there are in your write-up there, you go over, in your constraints section, you go over specific areas that were tested for contamination, areas that had concern, and areas that it was established there wasn't concern. I'm wondering if I guess I don't have, this isn't really a question. I needed more information in that section. I needed more information about who determined that, how it was determined, what position those areas that are no longer concerned, what state are they currently in, and how, I'm trying to think about how do we think about this as a brownfield piece of property, how does that impact our vision for the property? And so that is, I think, something that would be great to see extended in this phase 1 approach. And then I have more, but we can discuss, finally go over those later.
Commissioners, I'd like to see how we, collect and define the questions that we heard. Mike started to do that. I think we need to do that collectively as a group. And then I think what outcomes we can pool to sort of make, let's call it sense of what we've heard. I would start by dividing what I heard into 3 pieces. One is clearly there's a very strong community input from this group that industrial is not strong on this site. There is a real hesitancy about industrial use. We're not talking battery storage, we're talking industrial use. We certainly heard that, and again. The other thing that I heard in general was just the timing questions about how the master plan interacts engages in a way that the community can really participate in the master plan. And I think that needs to be digested and responded to. The second chunk I heard was I want to call it a lack of content in the master plan to date. And it was pieces like the cultural issues, environmental issues, tourism impacts, circulation in the bridge. A lot of that I think you can explain as that's going to be in the next step, the next piece. But at this point, I think it was a problem for tonight, that there was a lack of information in terms of how to respond. So my outcome, commissioners, is I'd like to go through, there's a number of other questions that were raised I want to highlight. And if you could help me, we'll just go through and say them. We're not going to respond tonight, but we want to make sure that we get a response eventually to what the community said. And then I guess my question is schedule. Is there any way that we can get confidence around how this all comes together? And that would be my two outcomes from this evening. Are you confident and comfortable with going forward that way?
Mm-hmm.
I do think we still need to have more of our own comments, because at this point we've just been asking questions, and we have to, I think each of us may have.
Do you want to do your comments first? We can do it that way. Let's do that. And then we'll go to the community's comments.
Yeah, actually, my comments were going to incorporate some of the communities, but that's.
Well, let's do it that way.
I don't think it really matters. Just one specific question that Betty asked, which was respect to the Scott Street, what I'm going to call the terrace. When you go right out here, there's about plus or minus 3 acres of flat terrace. Not flat, it's kind of a bowl. And then there's a slope, so it's a flat terrace. It is a buildable site, in my opinion. Just trying to answer that one particular question. It's not all slope. With respect to trying to combine some of my previous comments and some of the public comments, the reason I brought up the creeks and the original topography of the site is that it was quite different than it is now. And I look at Morro Bay and I try to figure out what Morro Bay is now that we're not really a fishing village anymore. And I go back through time and I look at what Morro Bay was. And Morro Bay, a long time ago was just nature. And then eventually some Indians moved here 10,000 years ago. And then Spaniards and Mexicans and the rest of us. But that history in this report really didn't do much justice to the first couple of million years and the first 10,000, the next 10,000 after that. And I would hope that my own experience with cultural resources is that creeks move around, and as the creeks moved around on our own family's land years ago on Morro Creek, occasionally an Indian would come out of the ground because the creek took away 20 feet of that bank, and we'd have to go rebury him. And if I look at the creeks on this property, well, none of them they're all now man-made, and the old channels are there, and there's essentially graveyards, and there's probably a lot of resources on parts of this property that we need to understand where they are. We can't just write that off and say that's going to be X. I think we need to know what was there. And beyond the Indians, this property was also what used to be called the Willows. And the Willows started roughly where the high school is and went all the way down to the Marine Mammal Center. And that entire area was a riparian, essentially wetland. And the creeks moved around depending on how the storms hit. And occasionally a big storm would come and things would flood and a sandbar would come up and the creek, instead of going down where it comes out now, it would move southward and come out more in towards the harbor. And the little creek that we used to skateboard in called the Ditch, which has had different uses of late, that creek used to come right down where the Marine Mammal Center is, and it would enter into the bay plus or minus between Gaffco and the Harbor Hut. Those things need to be in this report, in my opinion, and I think that they'll give us a lot better idea of how to proceed, and especially when you look at what is Morro Bay. Morro Bay is this time with the Salinans and with the Chumash, and Morro Bay is the time before that with the natural history of the volcanoes, and the time after that with the Spaniards and the Mexicans and blah, blah, blah. They don't really apply to this site per se, except that two major land grants in town run right through the center of it. The edge of the Morro y Cayucos and the Rancho San Bernardo are smack dab down the middle of this site. And it'd be interesting to know why those kinds of questions, they haven't really been answered yet. I'm a little bit, as I brought up before, concerned about the storm surge in combination with a king tide, in combination with climate change related sea level rise. That's why I was asking about the difference between the two different graphics on number 5 and number 7, as it were. My experience, the highest sea level we've ever seen in Morro Bay it was in the mid-70s. I look at the king tides every year, and the highest king tide wasn't just because it was a high king tide, it was because it was a high king tide in combination with a storm surge. And that's what made, and that highest tide, I won't go into the details, it was higher than they've been recently. But I think that those three things, king tides in combination with the storm surge, in combination with sea level rise, should probably be, maybe that's not technically the way these things get drafted, so someone can shoot me, but that's the way I would like to see it drafted.
And Eric, be a little more specific. This is valuable information technically, but it also evaluates the risk.
Yeah, it shows how deep the site will be, given some number of years, given some event.
And that's important for how we develop it.
Exactly. I'm going to tangenting sideways a little bit. The circulation subject has been a topic, and most of that circulation subject goes around the bridge over the creek, so we can connect Tascadero Road to the Embarcadero. That's one piece of the circulation in my mind for automotive. The second piece of circulation is the connection of the power plant site through that tail end of Quintana that comes up and essentially juts out into the Limos feed. I still think of it as A&W root beer, but it's the Limos feed now site. And there's also this off-ramp off the freeway right there. The northbound off-ramp off the freeway is immediately next. And that's a horrible situation when you get off there and people coming under the bridge southbound on Main Street. That intersection needs to be redesigned as part of this, whatever happens in the future, I would suggest. And probably that off-ramp needs to turn 90 degrees sort of southwesterly and tie into Quintana so that together the traffic off the freeway and the Quintana traffic going easterly towards Main Street will all enter Main Street all at once. That would be my initial suggestion. I won't get into the pedestrian and bicycle stuff because that would all be messed up by that, but that's a solvable equation. I also think that there should be some overlay that discusses the city's interests, the city-owned lands, the state-owned lands that we manage, and then the privately held property lines, the PG&E lines, and how there's a complicated interface down there, and I really don't even understand it myself, and I've tried to, and there may be people that have a better understanding of how all that works at the harbor. But we should probably have a discussion about that separately later. I'll bring it up at the end. That's my questions and thoughts.
Eric, thank you. Michael? Joe?
Put in it simplest terms, I'm very much aware that in the largest sense of the word, the citizens of Morro Bay are being asked to decide what they would like to be done with 82 of the 107 acres. That's the simplest way of putting the proposition. I'd ask everyone to think about that. And I'm also concerned about sort of overloading the ability of the community to conduct profitable discussion and intercourse when we're trying to figure out with both the general plan in its first phase, because the second phase is sometime in the distant future when there are projects available for the balance of the land. And at the same time, all of this interest and discussion will be created about the environmental impact report. And I suspect that everyone is much more concerned about the environmental impact and the report than a distant plan, specific plan in phase 2, which may or may not ever occur. So I wish that we could put some time between those so that people aren't overwhelmed in how they deal with these two pressing issues.
Thank you, Joe. Asia?
I mean, I want to respond to the ask of visioning and dreaming about what could be done in these sections of the master plan. For those of you in the audience, there's on page 46, the property's broken up into different colors, and we've been asked in the presentation to kind of comment on what we could see, what we agree with and don't agree with in those sections. And so I just want to provide some of that. And in response to what we've heard from the public and what I think goes to the ethos of what Morro Bay is, it really sounds like and what I think is really important is that in the future this part of town be one that really prioritizes our natural environment, either, as it has been in the past, or what's resilient and sustainable going forward in the face of a changing climate and in the face of potential development. That we protect our ESHA areas, that we protect our habitats for endangered species, and that we prioritize the beauty of the coast and the view and livability of the area as a natural environment. I think that the cultural resources falls into that, right? That where native and historical resources exist on this area, that we are able to identify that we're able to preserve and protect that. I think that's a big priority. And then I also think that I don't know what our role is right now in discussing the mechanisms for making some of this happen, but thinking about can the master plan, maybe this is for phase 2, can the master plan discuss potential planning mechanisms to make some of that happen? And so being able to give us a menu of mechanisms to incentivize things like sustainable design and resilient environments for this master plan would be really helpful. I think something that because this is a floodplain, that's going to be necessary anyways for any future development. It would be great to see in your discussion of the floodplain and hazards, maybe this is too detailed, but a discussion of the regulatory environment around floodplains. Do we have a local floodplain manager? How does that impact development? What are FEMA's requirements for 100-year floodplains? How will that impact what is put there, particularly on the waterfront, in order to address some of the concerns that the public and Eric brought up? It would be really great to see, are there planning mechanisms? I mean, there's the FEMA's regulatory environment for the 100-year floodplain, but are there other planning mechanisms that we as a city can use to incentivize or require resilient infrastructure in this area? Along with that, it'd be great to, maybe this is too much, but I would like to see how our capital plan in town interacts with this property, and how does that impact potential future development. Moving on to circulation, I would really like to see the environment prioritized. I'm not one that would love to prioritize cars in this place. It would be really great to improve circulation. I would love to see circulation that actually moves cars away from the rock and the parking area in the rock, and makes pedestrian and bike access the primary mode of transportation in these areas, of course with access for people with other physical abilities. And with that, it would be great to see circulation suggestions that keep traffic moving and keep lanes small and keep roadways, maybe one-way roadways to get cars out of the area and through the area rather than stopping and staying in the area. So with the idea of clearing up the Embarcadero, clearing traffic away, that's in the Embarcadero up and out. But I would also like to see a circulation recommendations that encourage more walking around the Embarcadero and around the waterfront there. I like the idea of a consolidation of parking rather than an increase of parking. Something that's practical and serves, that meets the needs of the Embarcadero without letting parking lots be our main view in that area. And then finally, along Scott Street, it would be really great to learn about some potential planning mechanisms or overlays that could incentivize. It looks like kind of a difficult topography, but maybe incentivizing affordable housing on the north side of Scott Street, developing out that edge of the property to see housing in an area that already has housing. It'd be great to see if there are basically like what tools are in our planning toolkit to get some of those visions and goals to happen. I could say like a million more things, but I'll stop there.
Well, and I was next, but thanks, Asia, for saying everything I was going to say. So I totally agree with everything she said, because if you look at the report, starting on page 46, where we have the vision and guiding goals and objectives, we're going to need time. So I agree with Commissioner Graffia again. Time is going to get us there. We need to be engaged as well as the public. The public needs to have the opportunity to work with us on this master plan. We haven't had that opportunity. That's why I made it a point. This is our first chance to do this, and Eric will probably agree or disagree with me, but this will probably be the largest development in Morro Bay's history, ever. I developed a lot more in the Bay Area, but 107 acres is a lot of development, so it is what it is. So go ahead, Eric. No? Okay, that's it.
Well, we might make it out of here by 9.
Yeah.
So I'll give you my comments. Master plans are really, really important. And this is one of the more difficult master plans I've seen in my career, both as a planner and as an architect. Difficult because of the complexity. Typically, a good master plan kind of comes from an awareness of community input and then a strong awareness of the site conditions. It's not an arbitrary effort in my mind, especially when it's hard. So I'd have to say I'm pretty disappointed in the presentation tonight. I didn't see that evidence in hardly anything. It's very hard to come up with a vision when there isn't a platform of discussion. And I think you can do better. We've heard from Eric, it is about the history, it is about the storm surge, it is about the circulation tying into this. We've heard from the community, it is about cultural resources. To ask for vision without that map, I think I just don't get it. I'm sorry, I just don't. And the way you've broken them into 5 areas, I don't even see the justification for that. I think there needs to be a really strong commitment to this plan. The city needs better, in my mind. I'm not sure the commission agrees, and you're just hearing opinions. This is a study session, and take it for what it's worth. I think you guys can do better. I think you need to focus. I think the community will not accept anything less than a thoughtful, complete understanding to move forward. I don't know if that's helpful, but if I didn't say it, I think I would not be consistent with what I heard tonight and what I see as a professional. Commissioners, any final words?
I don't see an advantage to moving fast.
To what?
To moving fast. There's no advantage. I mean, like if this had been a hotel project driving this master plan, we would be looking at the same sorts of issues, but I would suggest, I'm going to bet that the hotel project wouldn't require that they tear down the power plant. You know, and so there'd be a wholly different kind of master plan then. And so we're looking at a master plan which is really specific to a project that is not to be named. It's an interesting dilemma for us.
I think it's hard.
And if it was a different kind of master plan, it wouldn't be the same discussion at all. And so it's not, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the genericizing the master plan when it's so obviously directed around one given situation. So for me, I would suggest that, as the public has to some degree, that there's why are we pushing? If an initiative is passed, we only have so much staff time. We have a new, community development director interim. We're going to have a new development director, and to push this fast is not in the city's best interest. It's in our best interest, in all honesty, to do just as the public asked, and just wait.
Could I ask, Ryan, would you be willing, I don't want to put you on the spot, and you don't have to have all the answers, but how does this input, does it help you? Cindy, is there help here? Can you tell us how?
Yeah, this is certainly helpful. We'll obviously bolster some of the background discussion to make sure the second piece of this draft master plan, which will include some land use mapping, as well as an action plan, which includes some of the planning toolkit stuff that will be included during the public review draft.
Cindy?
And I would just add, I mean, the feedback that we're getting tonight is fantastic. It's great. What you will see when the plan comes back is some of these things that you're asking for. It will be more fleshed out. And again, this is just an early opportunity. It is an early draft of the draft master plan. And so where it is missing some things, you are very much correct, and that more will become. But really the goal was to, engage with the Planning Commission, get your feedback early on so that we can, use that to iteratively develop the master plan, and then continue with the community workshops, and then use that community input to even further refine the master plan. So it is all part of the process.
And thank you guys for those comments. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the audience. Tonight's discussion, I thought, was smart. It was informed. And I think it was, in a way, unrelenting. We're not going to accept less than a good plan. And there is not going to be a substitution, I don't think, from this commission or this community that's going to accept something less than we can feel confident in and dependent. It's not just one more step, right? It's not just another box to check. And that's a challenge for Rincon and the city. And it'll take the vigilance of the audience to keep us there, as well as, I think, the commitment of the commission. And so let me say thank you very much. This was a very helpful conversation for me, too. Go ahead, Asia.
Is there, Cindy, a way, as the public or the commission have more thoughts about the master plan, is there a way to contribute ideas?
Yes, absolutely. So for additional questions, comments, input, the public or commission can email myself as city staff. That was on the final page of Ryan's presentation, but my email is on the city's website under the planning division page. And then certainly if there are questions that need to be directed to Ryan at Rincon, I can forward those questions to him, and but happy to take additional public comment And at this point, you know, the next step would be our next community workshop that will be next month.
I'd be willing to offer, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but we've had good luck with this before, where the commission, two of us, which is not a quorum, could be involved and work with RINCON and try to interpret what some of the questions we've heard here and try to bring some focus on areas that we think are missing right now or inadequate. Would that be helpful, Ryan? And Eric, would you be willing to do that with me? It can only be two of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Cindy, too, I had a question here about when was staff going to engage? When were you going to give us your report on what you saw, like what we just saw tonight, right? So you're saying you're going to come back, beef it up, you're listening, you're going to put additional information in the report that was just given to us by a third-party RINCON. So your staff usually gets that information and then works it out too, right? You work on it like we work on it.
Right, exactly.
So that hadn't happened yet.
Well, I mean, as part of the process, so the city contracted with RINCON to prepare the master plan because we don't have the staff capacity to write a master plan ourselves.
Yeah.
And so part of contract management is staff works with the consultant and we review the work product. What you saw presented in the presentation and in the staff report and the attachment tonight was just the earliest phases of the draft master plan. So we wanted to get the public comment tonight, the Planning Commission comment. We got that. That's great. We will digest that, and then RINCON, as our consultant, will further flesh that document out. City staff will review that, and that's, you know.
And I'm getting back
that
to what the
process is-
chair was recommending, that two planning commissioners work with staff, not RINCON, on getting it to that level that we need it, right?
Well, no, with RINCON as well, yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
if it's
I think that's
viable,
the
if we can do it.
advantage,
I
is
mean-
to
The attorney's here.
not wait for the next presentation
Well-
and redigest it.
Right, and so what that would look like is two of the planning commissioners would meet with myself and RINCON. I mean, in this sense, when we hire consultants, it's an extension of our staff capability because we do have a very small department. But Chairperson Roshan is correct. We've had great success with other subcommittees, and the process is that the subcommittee would meet with city staff, and then if there's a consultant, that person is folded in, so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and we will go ahead and digest and take under submission your recommendation for creating a subcommittee like that. Make sure there are no like Brown Act protocols. We'll maybe talk to you about some of the details and how that would work, and whether that such a commission would actually have to be appointed by the city council in terms of who would serve.
Well, it's not a commission, it's an ad hoc
It's
group.
an ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
Which is actually a term that the FPPC has sort of
No, it's a precise
removed
term.
from the
yes.
books, but
Oh, is
but-
that right?
Yes, it is. But we will go ahead and digest that.
Yeah, and Lana, I appreciate that, because what would happen when I was stuck on other master plans is it would have to come back to the full commission. You cannot delegate, right? So I got stuck in those where the commission would have to meet for hours and hours and hours as a full body. You got to make sure you can do that.
And there's other issues that can come up, like what's the duration of that ad hoc committee going to be? Again, using that term.
Thank you, and we'd love to hear it because there's nuance. Yep.
Okay.
So I'd like to move off of this item. Are we good, commissioners?
Comment.
Not quite. Joe?
Am I correct in believing that there is no real urgency to this, because as we are accustomed to opining on very specific details of a plan, we are never really going to see specific details. Those will only be forthcoming in a phase 2, and we are only talking about phase 1. So I think the fact that there is no urgency makes it even more understandable that we should take our time with this.
Cindy, would you like to respond to that?
Yes. So we do have statutory requirements as it relates to entitlement applications. So we do have a legal responsibility to review this application, process the application, and then, get through the process. We are doing the master plan because there's an entitlement application. So it has been delayed thus far because of the changing project description and the need to make sure that we've gotten the sufficient amount of technical studies. We are now at the tail end of that environmental review process where we will release the EIR shortly. Once that happens, that does, set a timeline where there is a certain review period for the EIR, and then we would bring those entitlement applications to the Planning Commission. Let's remember the master plan is triggered because of the entitlement applications, so that really does need to go with the entitlement applications, which we anticipate would be this summer. The good news is though we're not doing a master plan for the whole, the whole detailed thing. We're doing it in a phased approach, so that will allow us to respond.
So one of the questions that we had asked you earlier is to put together a timeline and show the interface of, things that are codependent and dependent, but things that might be parallel. Because I think the community asked for that, and I think it's helpful.
And if it's helpful, we can, we do have we can update our website to more clearly spell out what this timeline looks like to be, more transparent to the public.
Love
Happy
it.
to do that.
So I'm going to go on to the rest of the items so we can say goodnight. And let me say, thank you, Ryan. Lana, thank you. Cindy, thank you. Michael, welcome to Morro Bay. Unfinished business, commissioners? Planning Commission comments, future agenda items?
I think
Eric?
the discussion that I've been pushing a couple times now around the nuances of the waterfront lines, let's call it the ley lines, whatever you want. There's 1,000 lines down there, and they all overwrap one. There's not 1,000. There's like 4, but they confuse me, and I think they confuse the public in many ways, and or maybe many people don't even know they exist, but just how different parts of the waterfront work relative to leaseholding, relative to sales tax, relative to how, whether it's fee, whether it's lease, where PG&E pieces come in, where the cities, where the states, all those lines, and they're out in the harbor and they're on land, and I think they overlay a lot of what we were talking about
So
today,
this
and
would
how
be
how they conflict with.
agendizing a study session that anticipates how the Harbor Advisory Board and the Planning Commission might interface, which is a meeting that we're looking at in the future.
Yeah, essentially, I just want to have a lesson on how all those lines work.
Would you be willing to work with me to come up with, this would be an hour study session, we can invite some locals to comment? Okay. So let's agendize. This is a study relative to the waterfront and kind of a familiarization on how the commission might begin to interface?
It's not so much about how we interface, it's just understanding where all the lines, I mean, there's coastal commission lines, there's many borders down there that are confusing.
So we'll get back to you with more specifics, but we wanted to get it publicly on the agenda.
Certainly. So, and we can also do a staff presentation that really kind of demystifies, if you will, how development is processed on the waterfront, the difference between public and private lands, what is the Tidelands Trust, and how does that interface with like coastal commission's permitting authority versus the city's permitting authority. That's, we can certainly put that.
Yeah, and all the previous initiatives, et cetera. That
right, Measure D.
impact.
Great.
Yeah, and yeah.
Thanks. Mike?
Yeah, one of the prior directors, one of his final words to me were, we're going to get the public community benefits agenda item soon. So that's on your lap, Michael. He said that going out the door. So you might want to go back, you might want to get them, but he said that because it even came up tonight. And we've had 2 projects where they were different. We're ready with our memo. We have a standing subcommittee, which, like the attorney said, was established legally. So we have a committee that started maybe almost 2 years ago to figure out community public benefits and how that would apply to projects like this.
Great.
So
thank you, Mike.
can we get that on?
And before everybody leaves, I want to do one more advertisement for March 5th, where we get the Cal Poly landscape architect students here explaining 3 schemes for around Morro Rock, which I think will really be fun. I'd really encourage everybody to see it. And Kelsey, you're going to be a part of that, right? Thank you so much, that presentation. Anybody else on the meeting? Do we want to announce that?
Yes, so the next community workshop on the power plant master plan, it will be on March 27th from 6 to 8 here in this room at the Veterans Hall. We will have a flyer on the website, but it says, don't miss this chance to make a difference. Join us as we discuss the power plant master plan, what to expect, interactive session, information sharing, voice your concern, and collaborative brainstorming. Although not mandatory, it would be really great if we got some RSVPs, because then that way we can make sure there's enough tables and chairs for everyone in the small group sessions.
And I think our final item, Michael, you get the last word as our new interim director. And how much fun is this?
Yeah, this has been great. I think I'm going to reserve my last words for when I get a little more context and can put everything in proper perspective. But thank you for
a warm welcome again, and thank you. And it only gets better from here, honest.
This isn't even the deep end.
With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Chris and Anthony.